ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me? Is this coming in okay? Yay! Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. And for those of you on Zoom, I think that's the camera. We appreciate you, and welcome to our 5th annual Women in STEM Symposium. Last year we had a virtual one, so it's really nice to see some of you guys here in person this year. This is an event that is really special to me because this is what kind of introduced me to women in STEM on this campus. I came in and had no idea, saw this symposium advertised, went, and then 3 years later, I'm the vice president and planning it myself. So it's really special to me, and I really appreciate you guys coming. So first, a little bit about what CU Anschutz Women in STEM is. We are a student-run organization that was established in 2015, and our mission is to substantially increase the representation and support of women in STEM through advocacy, education, community outreach, skill building, and we do this through several events we host throughout the year, as well as several partnerships we have. So we really try to start conversations and discussions and bring awareness to issues related to women in STEM fields. And we do this again through several events we host, panelists, speaker series, our mentorship program, as well as some public outreach. And we're trying to incorporate some more science communication into our club. So if you have any questions, there are several officers here and up at the front table. Also, we'll be having a little networking event across the street, and some of us will be in our shirts. So please feel free to ask us any questions. And then, as always, follow us on social media or join our listserv if you aren't already on there, so that you can stay connected with any upcoming events or opportunities that we offer. So also out front, we are selling some of our Women in STEM merchandise. We have some shirts and totes and stickers. And then during the break, we'll also going to be raffling off a couple shirts and stickers for you guys, both on Zoom and those of you that are able to attend today. So we'll do that during the break, and then at the end, or you can always visit the table out front and get yourself some swag. So I'm not going to run through the schedule completely today so we can get started on time, but your programs do have the schedule in there as well. So like I mentioned, after the event here, we're going to have a networking event over at Ursula Brewery, which is walking distance away, and no RSV required. Everyone can come over there and kind of chat and meet some of the speakers and women in STEM officers. So I want to just give a huge thank you to all our speakers and panelists that you're going to be hearing from today. They have been great answering my annoying emails and really appreciate their support for this club and organization, and really excited to hear what they have to say today. So for those of you on Zoom, if you're comfortable, we do ask that you turn on the video camera so we can see and engage everyone. However, we ask that everyone remain muted throughout the presentation until it is time for discussion. So if you do have a question, you can type your question into the chat box to either everyone or myself, Kendra Prutton, and just indicate if you would like to be anonymous, and I can read your question out. Alternatively, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself when prompted and ask your question, and the speakers will be able to actually see you right up there on that screen, whoever's asking the question. I'm going to try to address the questions in order, and we want only one question per person unless there is time at the end. So for all the speakers, the time for question and answers will be at the end of their presentations. Again, the panel will be a little bit different structure. So with that, we will get started with our first speaker. We'd like to thank, I hope I say it correctly, Dr. Jagannathan. So you can use this mic or?
Yeah, I'll just speak into this.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it. All right. Can everyone see and hear okay? Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me, Kendra, and all the organizers. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you. Before I start, I'm an assistant professor on campus. I've been here close to 4 years now. So I'm going to just tell you about my trajectory and how things have gone for me. But I want to start with a warning that everything I say, take it with a grain of salt, because there is this thing called survivor bias. When you have gone through certain experiences and you've come out the other end, you tend to believe that whatever you did was the right thing to do and that it helped you survive. But oftentimes, in a career, especially in academia, it can really be like there's a lot of luck involved, there's a lot of chance, a lot of circumstances which go perfectly right for you. So I want to just say that, keep that in mind, that survivor bias is strong, and what worked for me may not work for you, and vice versa. Something may not have worked for me, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't work for you. So consider the fact that your journey is unique, and you can take away from mine what you can. And I'm happy to always, answer questions, but keep this in mind. All right. So today, I want to obviously tell you about my path, but not just from the perspective of, here's all the things I did, here's all my successes, everything is awesome. I do not want to do that. I want to actually tell you about all the things that are not visible when you look at me, right? All the insecurities, the fears, the pain, the suffering that goes into it. Mainly because oftentimes you look at someone and you see their success and you don't know what happened underneath that. And I want to sort of make that open and welcome questions, and happy to chat with you about that, because this is real life, right? We're all humans. There's no superheroes here. We all have our struggles, and your struggle is unique. Mine was unique, but let's make it open and talk about it, okay? I'm going to start at the beginning. I was born in India in a small village called Pershulur, 3,000, maybe 4,000 people. I had a pretty happy childhood, which is one of the privileges I would consider of my background. Some of my earliest memories would be torrential downpours, sitting on my dad's lap after dinner, listening to bedtime stories. I should say that my dad was a physics lecturer, and he would always tell me stories of scientific discoveries. I don't know why, it was very weird, but I loved it, right? And I think if I had to trace back where I am now to a single point in my life, it would be those days and evenings when, before I even consciously thought of what I wanted to become, of thinking, I could look at the natural world around me, ask questions, discover things, and then transform how the face of, the world. Like, that was a powerful drug to me. And I think that's something I've held on my entire career. And I think that some days it's not necessarily what drives me every day, but I think that if you had to ask me, like, why do you do this? I think it's those early seeds of, I could be a scientist. This could be a living. Like, I could discover things, right? I think that's what got me on this path. And that's, again, for a 6-7-year-old to even know that is a career, that is a thing that people do for a living, that was a huge privilege, right? Not everyone knows that that's even a possibility. So I want to, say that that's how I got my start in thinking science could be a career. Doesn't mean I knew how I was going to do it. Doesn't mean I always thought I was going to even be here, right? I always thought, who knows, but this is something I want to do, okay? So the first career step that I would say I took was actually going from my little village in India to Durham, North Carolina to start a PhD at Duke University. Sight unseen, 2 suitcases, $500. It was probably the first time I really faced any adversities in my life. That's Duke. And the main reason is that I was an immigrant in a country that I was unfamiliar with people I didn't know. And I actually had a huge language barrier. A lot of people from India speak English perfectly. That was not me. I went to school in local medium schools, and I actually I could count on one hand the number of English movies I had watched until that point, and on both hands the number of English books I had read, right? So I spoke very poor English, okay? And people that I met, my cohort, everyone was better than me at that. So I think that I had a really hard time connecting with people. My first 2 years of grad school, it was like a landmine. I didn't do well in classes because everything was based on discussions. My grades were crap, but I still wanted to do science. And I think that that's what kind of kept me going. But it's, if there's a lot of sort of the uncertainty, the identity crises. There's a lot that comes with being an immigrant. So if you have friends who are immigrants, especially at this day and age, I would say, extend kindness, be patient. They may not understand your words, but they want to, and be patient, right? I had definitely people who thought I was deaf and that they would speak louder. I was like, no, I just needed to slow down because I'm translating my answer to you from Tamil to English in my head. Give me a minute here, right? So be sensitive, right? And I think that's something I would say. So, it can sometimes feel like you're behind a wall yelling and nobody hears you, right? And I think that was sort of the biggest diversity I faced when I first got to this country. Find your community. I think I have a few sort of, things I took away from these experiences. And I would say that the thing that turned things around for me was maybe 2 years in, I found my people, right? Other immigrants in the beginning, but eventually, basically everyone. I made a lot of friends and people were kind. And I think that finding people that you can relate with and who understand you, or if they don't, at least acknowledge that they don't understand you. I think that's really important. Okay. And maybe third year of grad school, my PI moved to a different institution. And for context, I had just met who would eventually become my husband. I was madly in love. And then my PA tells me, let's move to Ohio, by the way. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to find something else because I had just, like I said, found my community. I was feeling settled and I wasn't willing to uproot myself. I had people tell me, boys come and go. You should stick with your PhD advisor. Let me tell you, that's not true. Good ones don't come and go. And you can absolutely switch labs and still have a successful career. So if any of you are in a bad situation, like mine was different, but it was end of my third year when I switched labs and started over my PhD. Okay. And it was actually a great thing for me because when I switched over, I already had gotten over the initial hump of being a new student and all the, things that come with it. So I felt like a postdoc, really. Like I felt like I was just doing science. I was happy. I had finally, found something that I was moving towards instead of, this is a piece of advice I give everyone. Always when you're making a transition in your career, move towards something, not just away from something, right? What does it mean? To me, that meant that, I wasn't just saying, oh, I don't want to go to Ohio, so I'm going to find the next thing that comes along my way. I actually took like a good 2 months and I reached out to, I think, 18 labs. This was 2008, peak of the economy crashing. So a lot of labs didn't have a spot for me, but it was the 18th lab that finally accepted me. So I think that the reason I kept trying is I wanted very specific things. I wanted to move towards something I wanted. I didn't want to just take up the first lab that came my way and join that. So explore your options, move towards things that you're passionate about, right? Because this job is tough. We are not in it for the money, for sure. So you need to at least enjoy it. And I would say like that's the biggest thing. Okay, so the next 3-4 years of my PhD was honestly amazing. I learned how to balance, to some extent, work and life. It's a constant struggle. I was doing experiments. I would travel with my, my boyfriend at the time, went to meetings. I was actually a singer in a band. I published, I volunteered a ton. I had a lot of friends. I really found, if there is a balance, that was the time I found it, and I've lost it since, just so you know. But those 4 years were amazing, right? And they reinforced my desire to do what I was doing and kind of made me recommit to this path that I had chosen. And it took me 7 years to graduate. Like, that's another thing I tell people. Like, it doesn't matter how long you're in grad school, right? People often say, oh, I've been here 5 years, I must be a failure. It all depends on your perspective. Like, those were the best 4 years that I had as a scientist. I was not in a hurry to graduate. Towards the end, I was. At least, I was having a blast, right? And 7 years. But realistically, I joined the lab I joined in my end of third year. So it was 4 years in the lab. It was great. I had a lot of papers coming out of that. And then I got married during that time. And then the next, I graduated. One thing I would say is, grad school is a long time. Do not put your lives on hold, right? People often say, oh, now is not the great time. I'm going to start a family when I get to the next position. There is no good time and there is no bad time. The time is whenever it happens and you will figure it out. And that is just how my experience has been. So I was happy the whole time because I didn't put anything on hold. I just lived my life because that's what you do. You have to go with the flow and not put your life on hold. That would be something I would tell, especially women, right? I think we all have the sense of, oh, my biological clock is ticking and we make decisions based on that. I would say just do things when they make the most sense and don't try to control that too much, because honestly, any time is a bad time and any time is a good time, okay? On that note, towards the end of my PhD, I also got pregnant. So I now, my husband and I, we had a baby coming. We were now a classic dual career couple, right? So I couldn't just go anywhere I wanted to for my postdoc. He had already moved on, so I had to follow him to Seattle, from Durham to Seattle. So at that time, I wanted to again, I felt a little stuck, to be honest. I was a little resentful that I had to follow him and it wasn't my choice to make. But honestly, I think that being stuck in that little box of like, I have to go to Seattle, let's see what's there, allowed me to find something I would never have otherwise found. I found this dual mentorship situation, which in hindsight was amazingly perfect for me, but it would never have been my first choice had I not been stuck in that place of needing to go there. And the lesson there, I would say, is sometimes you don't always get to dictate every aspect of the choices you make, but that's okay. It can still work out, right? You just make the best decision you can with the information you have and then see what comes of it. So that was, was in Seattle. I had a baby 3 months into my postdoc, which, I said the good times and bad times. It definitely felt like the worst time to have a baby. But, what do? You're 9 months pregnant, you have to give birth. So one thing I would say is, I had been told by all these people my whole life, oh, moms are efficient. You become a mom, you become magical. Everything just happens. You just get stuff done. Utter lie. If you were not efficient before you became a mom, you do not magically become efficient after you become a mom. Take it from me. You have to work hard at it, and you have to do it because that's how you survive. It's not because it just comes to you. You have to work hard because you're pumping 3 times. You are, if you're nursing, and between that you have to fit all of your little incubations. Somewhere you have to eat. You have to also use the restroom. You have to be efficient. There is no choice. That doesn't mean it's not a struggle. It's a struggle, and you will eventually get there. But do not accept when people say, oh, it takes work, hard work. And one thing I want to touch upon too is, in my whole career, probably the time I was closest to quitting the path I was on was when I was a new mom. Not only because being a mom was difficult, but I had severe postpartum depression, undiagnosed, right? I went to the doctors whatever number of times, everything was fine. I was drowning. Nobody knew. I eventually found out, hopefully before it was not hopefully, thankfully before it was too late. But there's a lesson in there, right? We underdiagnose depression and a lot of mental health issues in this country and actually in many countries, India included. And I think that there's no shame in accepting that you're really not okay and that you need help. And I would say, I was ready to give up. And I think that really going to therapy, taking medication, all of those things which made me feel like a failure were actually what helped me stay on track. So if you are in a place like that where you feel like, I'm broken, something must be wrong with me, this is biology at work. And some of it is just the society where there isn't enough support, right? Raising a child takes a lot of work, and moms and dads were not meant to do it alone. So there's a reason why this is happening. And it doesn't even need to be a child. Let's say you have a sick parent, or you have a sibling you're caring for, you have a sick pet you're caring for, right? We used to live in huge communities that helped each other. That is no longer the case. We're all on our own. So get the help you need and don't be ashamed of that. The main thing is that you stay the path and that you do what makes you happy. You need to get the help to get there, right? So, and one thing I would say in terms of quitting is, this is a thing that I tell myself, Do not make major decisions on your worst days or on your best days, actually, because you would not be thinking straight. At least I wasn't. I would have a day when I'm like, I love my baby. I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mom. I would not have been happy the next day, or that, oh, my grant got not discussed. This sucks. I'm going to quit my career. So don't make decisions on those days, because those are few and far in between. Like most days are mediocre. So make your decisions on mediocre days and see, are you still happy doing what you're doing, right? So this time, Arun, I had to find my balance again. And like I said, I haven't quite found it fully, I would say. Some things had to go. I couldn't be in a band anymore. It was replaced by more time with family. I didn't have a huge network of friends anymore, just a couple friends, and they were good ones. And you need to find what to take out and what to replace it with, because that's where you make a value judgment, right? What are your values? What can you live with, right? Because time is finite. There's no eternal spring of time. So you need to figure out if something is getting added, what is coming off of your schedule, right? So again, this time I was a postdoc for 3 years. Time to make a move again, which is a constant in academics career, right? So one of the things that I struggled with here, and I think I was an exception, that I hadn't quite verbalized what I was going through until that point, that I was actually like having imposter syndrome. So I knew I had a good CV, that I would have a shot at an academic job, but there was a huge voice telling me, are you kidding yourself? Like, that's not going to happen. Like, you're not good enough, right? And I think that one of the things, like, that's a conversation we can have for 30 minutes in itself. But all I'll say is the thing that got me out of that is really mentors believing in me and telling me, you can't win if you don't play, right? And this is true for every single thing, every grant you'll apply, every award you apply to, every little thing you do. If you don't do it, you will never know if you'll succeed or not. So why say no to yourself? Let someone else say it to you, okay? And you can deal with you can get a tub of ice cream to deal with the rejection later, but let someone else say no to you. Don't tell it to yourself, right? So I ended up applying to so many jobs, 7 interviews, I had 4 offers, 3 of which were dual offers with my husband. So I had a very, very successful job search by any standards. And again, I was like, they made a mistake. I don't deserve this, right? And this is a constant in this career. I feel like it's a combination of 2 things. And what it is that we all know there's luck involved in getting what we want. But I think that the way to combat that is to really internalize that there is no freebie in academia. Nobody gives you a job because they feel sorry for you. Nobody, ever, okay? If you got it, you deserved it. It is also true there were 10 people who were equally qualified who did not get that. Keep that in mind. Have the humility to know that you were not, some amazing person who was the only person qualified to get it, but there was a line above which there were 100 people. There was some luck involved in which 10 of them got it. You were lucky, but you also deserve it, okay? So I think that really internalizing that is what has helped me to overcome some of my imposter syndrome, where, I know I'm lucky, right? I know I've had privileges, but I also deserve to be here because I have worked hard for this, okay? So then, I came to Denver to start my faculty position about 3 years ago. I mainly came here out of the places we had because I just loved the colleagues here and I just knew I would be happy. That was not the biggest salary I was offered. It was not the biggest startup I was offered, but I knew I would be happy here. And that was what drove my decision. And I'm glad to say that that has borne out. So if I thought I was busy before, boy, I had no clue what is coming for me, right? Earlier, I was hovering around, I'm doing okay, up to my neck. But now, you're underwater with a seal slapping you and a starfish on your face. Like, that's the kind of busy I am most days. So what can you do, right? There's this idea that, you can be this superhero who can do all of these things. That's a myth. It's just not true. You have to, again, go through all the things you do and find what do you take out, right? One thing that I've taken out is, I don't try to be present 24/7 in my lab. Like, I have a life and I have work. Like, I try to have a really strong partition between those two. It's not easy. right? Now that especially everything is happening on Zoom, it's so hard. And the pandemic has made it like 100 times worse. I also don't cook anymore. I'm lucky to have a husband who is happy to cook every single meal. I don't cook, which gives me time. I also have hired a cleaner. Like all of this is possible because now I make more money. So, people talk about how do we fix this pipeline issue? Like pay people more money. It fixes a lot of things, right? Anyway, so one of the other things I've also had to learn is to say no more. Clippy is very helpful. You said you'd love to, show sounds interesting, but do you need help remembering you're doing 10,000 things already? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes my mentors remind me, like, you can't do that, right? But you can't always say no also. Like, I could have said no to coming here and giving this talk. But the way I decide what I say yes to and what I say no to is I ask myself, what will I say no to in order to say yes to this? Is it still worth it, right? It might mean, I have half an hour less to prepare for some talk, 3 months from now. Like those things can be pretty intangible, but honestly, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. You may not consciously realize that, but like I said, time is finite. Your time is already 100% booked, right? And you already feel busy. So if you're saying yes to one more thing, what are you going to say no to, right? And is it worth it to do that thing, even though, talking to all of you, absolutely worth it, right? I want to do this. I want to be here. I also know that means I'm saying no to something else and I'm okay with it, okay? But make it a conscious choice. Don't just say yes to everything that comes your way. Especially as an assistant professor and a woman in a place that doesn't have many women, and a woman of color where in a place that has a diminishing number of women of color, I get asked to do a lot of service. Not all of it is beneficial for me. Some of it I do because I think it's still some value I'm adding to it that I believe in. Other times, I say no and I deal with the fallout. I just ask them, here's 10 things I'm doing. I don't think I can do justice to what you're asking me to do. So sorry, it's all about communicating your priorities and being honest with yourself about what you can and cannot do. All right. So a year ago, I had another baby, which was great. Again, now I told you already, like there were all these things, and now I have twice more in terms of personal life, right? So again, this is a constant balance of figuring out what to keep, what to take out, right? So one of the things that I really prioritize this time around, and again, some of it is because I'm able to, so I, decided to take time for myself to care for not only my body, but my mind too. This means, seeing a therapist again regularly. And again, I have good insurance now. I don't know if all of you have this opportunity. So like I said, pay people more, and that helps a lot. But another thing that I've also trying to do now is to not compare myself with others. It's a big one. It's a big one that I think every academic I know struggles with. And I have an asterisk in there because I'm not good at it yet. I still compare myself and I still feel bad. And this, as a mom, there's a constant sense of guilt. Oh, that parent is able to go to every child's ballet recital. I wish I could. But end of the day, everyone is on their own journey and they have their own value system. They have their own situations. You don't know what that is. Every person's fighting their own demons. Fight yours and focus on yours and figure out where you are going and get there, right? Like this is a work in progress, but I think that's a big one if you're staying in academia to work on, to not compare yourself to other people and judge yourself by someone else's yardstick. Why would you? Have your own, right? So hard, but I think worth it to invest time in learning how to do that. And I just want to finish, in terms of this thought, which is a lot of us feel like we are, plants growing in a rock, right? Like academia can be a hard place where you succeed not because of it, but in spite of it. Like the situation is so bad. So I think my last thing is to say, leave academia a better place than you find it. And this is a principle I try to apply in my own life, right? Just because I had it hard doesn't mean it needs to be hard for the next person. If I can do something that may not benefit me, but benefits people coming after me, that's worth it, right? So I think that if we all commit to leave this a better place than you found it, I think in the long run, that's going to go a long way. So like I said, I told you about all the different negatives, but there's also, support systems and privileges that have allowed me to do what I've done. A big one is mentors who have helped me along the way, lifted me up, Another one is all the people I work with. I wouldn't be able to do this without the amazing people I work with who motivate me to put in the hours, come in every day and do what I do. And finally, my family, my husband is an angel. I couldn't do what I do if he wasn't the person he is. So, not everyone has the privilege of sharing their life with someone. I think that to me, it has been a privilege, right? That can change too. But I think that it's really allowed me to do the things I do. So thank you. And any questions?
If any of you have questions here for her, and then I'll go into Zoom. So did you have different mentors throughout the transition of your career? Or did you have one in India or North Carolina or now or somewhere that kind of helped you out throughout the entire process?
Yeah, I've definitely had mentors that I still talk to, not from India anymore. I just didn't have such a strong mentorship back then. But my PhD advisor, I spoke to him the day I accepted my job offer. Was like, here are my options. This is my reasoning. Like, help me, right? So definitely, I've had different mentors that have helped me all along. Like, I still speak to my postdoc advisor when I have a tough day. We chat and discuss that. There are also, you can't get everything you want from just a small set of mentors. So sometimes you have to think about mentorship as like, I can learn how to be a good scientist from this person. But if I want to know how to, balance this aspect of my life, I may have to find a different mentor. So right now, I would say, I have a lot of different mentors that I go to for different things. It's almost like no one person can fulfill all of your needs. And that's true even when you're a grad student. Your PI is a person you can go to for a lot of things, but they're not going to be the one-stop shop for all your mentoring needs. You need to find multiple mentors, and that's just how it goes.
Does this work? Oh, yes, it does. You said you started your postdoc 6 months pregnant. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
How do you, how does that process work when you're already visibly pregnant? But then also, how do you ensure that you're finding a place that is supportive of that? Obviously, if you're joining and then immediately becoming a new mom or going on maternity leave or whatever it was, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so I will say that I was not visibly pregnant when I interviewed. And even when I accepted the offer, I was not. So I didn't really tell them I was pregnant, but I was worried. I was like, I'm going to basically tell them I'm starting 6 months pregnant and going on this, maternity leave a few months in. And their response when I told them was very telling, right? They were super supportive, like my mentors. They said, congratulations, let us know what you need. If they hadn't said that, I think I would have actually paused and considered if that's really a place I want to go to, right? So I think that in that way, there was less bias because I was not visibly pregnant, but that would also have been very telling, like how somebody reacted to me and how they approached that. Like I have friends who were pregnant when they were on the job interview, like for faculty position, and they said, you get to figure out actually if someone's going to be supportive or not because of how they react to you, how they treat you. And you deserve to have the support, right? So it doesn't make sense to accept a position where you don't feel like you'll be supported because there's so many opportunities out there that I would make sure you go someplace that you feel supported. Yeah.
So we have another question from Zoom, and she asks, did you share your struggles with your mentor? If so, how did you go about this?
Yeah, not for a long time. I was a very private person and I didn't feel like I could share it with my mentors. And part of it was, my mentors had no experiences in common with me. They were both older. white men, and I just didn't feel like I could tell them what I was going through. So I think that that's another reason why representation matters so much, right? So I think I really just had my husband to talk to, and I went to the doctor. I had other mom friends who I could chat with, but I didn't tell my mentors. So in hindsight, I think at least one of them would have been receptive to it. I just didn't know he would be, because I was scared. I didn't want to ruin, the relationship I had with him. But I will say though that one way that I have tried to, like I said, leave academia better. I try to be open about my struggles with my people now. So if they struggle, they know that I would be a safe person to come talk to. Because how would you know if I don't talk about it? I could be someone who says, you're fired, who knows, right? I mean, so I think that part of it is being open about these struggles and signaling to people that there's a safe space to have these conversations, if that answers the question.
So is there a common, I don't want to say issue, but something you see with your current grad students, whether it's imposter syndrome or personal life struggles coming into work, that you see frequently, or a piece of advice you'd like to give to the graduate students?
I think imposter syndrome is still huge, from what I can tell. I mean, there are some people who walk into any room and they feel like they belong, and I don't know how they do it. I would like to learn it. But most people are not that, right? So I would say, like I said, recognizing that you belong. Yes, you're lucky, but you belong. Like, internalizing that can really be helpful. Mental health struggles, I feel like the pandemic has really made it so much worse. So every single person that I see, I would say, if you can have access to a therapist, do it. It'll be the biggest, most transformative thing you can do for yourself, because there are ways you can trick your mind into functioning better. And why wouldn't you, right? So I would say like that's been huge for me. And I would say, if you can, do it. Yeah.
Thank you. That was an excellent talk, and you're getting streams of people stating how helpful and wonderful your presentation was.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so next up, we're going to have our panelists come up. This was organized to be centered around career questions, whether it's academic career transitions like we just talked about, or you are more interested in an industry position. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat. I was just going to have a couple chairs up here. The Zoom people might not be able to see all of you, but they'll be able to hear. So I'm going to stick with one microphone just so there's not a lot of feedback. Then you guys can talk and pass it around. Thank you, Carly. Yeah, if you guys feel comfortable. So I guess we'll start with each of you kind of introducing yourself, just what your current role is, a little bit about yourself, and then we will open the floor to questions for our speakers. So let me get that microphone on. Is it okay if I? Yeah, whatever you guys want. And then if we get tired, we'll sit down.
I don't. So there's a camera. There's a camera on it. Okay. Should we look at that when we're?
You can.
At the,
you guys all 2 feet this way, we can see all 3 of you. Might be off there for us, but they can see you clear.
Okay.
Can you see what?
No, that's what I'm.
Zoom can. We got a lot of people on Zoom, so.
Okay. What? So, oh, this does work. Okay. So I'm supposed to do just introduction.
Yeah.
Okay. So My name is Bruce Mandt. I'm an assistant dean in the grad school. I'm also the director of the Postdoc office and the career development office. My main goals for the campus is to ensure that we are supporting our research trainees in particular as they explore the different career options they have. A lot of the great work that our organizations like Women in STEM do is really important in supporting those processes as people kind of explore what they're interested in, ways to test things out. I have a deep connections and long connections to the campus. I have my PhD in pharmacology from here, so I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin. I came out to Anschutz for training. I did a postdoc on the Denver campus, was involved with the Postdoc Association. I was vice president for my president, Lora, on part of the PDA. And I use that story all the time about how important building peer networks are as you transition in careers. And so being part of organizations like Women in STEM, it's a great way to do some of that too and build those strong peer connections. Listening to just a little bit of what Suja was saying about, having those mentoring networks. It's not just people who are in positions beyond you that can provide mentorship, right? It's really about, who are all of your supporters, and having those networks are a really important part of that. So now I am privileged enough to be in a position to help the next generation of scientists as they figure out what it is they're interested in. And so I appreciate being invited today and look forward to taking your questions.
I'm Emily Bates. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Colorado and Carly's mentor. And I would say mentoring is my favorite and also the most important part of what I do in this career. I'm also the mother of 2 children, one who was born the day that campus shut down, and another that was 3 years old at the time. And I can second everything that Sue just said about that balance being a struggle, especially during the pandemic. We are so reliant on good childcare and reliable childcare. So yes, so that is another aspect of me that I am happy to answer questions about. What else do we want to? Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lora Wilson. So my history here, as Bruce said, is quite long. I was a graduate student in the molecular biology program. Bob Sclafani was my PI. He's since retired, so it's been a while. I did 2 postdocs here, one in the pulmonary sciences and then the Division of Medical Oncology. I'm with Pfizer. I'm an oncology field medical director with them. I support the genitourinary therapies, which is prostate, kidney, and bladder cancer. So my role is to disseminate the safe and effective use of those therapies throughout Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah. So it's a field-based position, meaning I work from home, but I do travel quite a bit within that geography, answering any questions regarding those therapies, clinical trials, and any other medical question. So we're called medical directors at Pfizer, but other companies will call it like an MSL. So it's like a medical science liaison position. And I've been with Pfizer since 2014. And so I'm really happy to be here today. I was Lauren Thompson's mentor last year. So I am a big supporter of giving back, like that was mentioned earlier, trying to leave academia a little bit better. When I was a graduate student, I knew I wanted to leave academia and I didn't have a lot of resources. So if anyone has questions about industry, even outside of that, you can pass my information along, you can contact me because I wanted to be that resource I couldn't find. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here today.
So I just want to make 2 quick comments. So one is just in terms of, awareness of identity and things like that. So I'm a father to 2 kids. So my daughter is 13 and my son is 11. And it just struck me that I didn't think about that aspect of my identity in my introduction, right? And that important difference, I think, sometimes. So my wife is a pediatric emergency medicine physician. So she works at Children's Hospital in the emergency department. And I frequently see that the challenges that she has as she's trying to navigate feeling called to be the room mom in the kids' class, but then she's doing, this evening shift and she's got that meeting and all those kinds of things, and that balance and that struggle. And so I just it struck me, so I wanted to comment on it, that, all of the privilege that we talk about and things that we have, and we don't call out privileges we have, we try to balance. I'm leaving from here to go pick my son up from school. We try to do those things, but I think it is very different still in our society. So that's the one comment I wanted to make. The other one is that Lora is underselling a little bit how brilliant she is. And I say that because, so Lora came in, and so one long history of giving back and supporting people. When I was a program coordinator on an undergraduate training grant in my prior position, I had Lora come in and talk to some of my undergrads about her experiences in science and things like that. And she shared this story about recognizing as a grad student that she didn't want to stay in academia. And she was interested in this career of being an MSL. She met somebody at a conference, and so she intentionally designed her postdocs to move her towards that goal and positioned her well for that. And so I think in terms of just, supporting people, but then being really strategic about how you can use your time in science and training in science, I think Lora has done it absolutely right. And I share that story with people all the time. So I just wanted to say those two things before we take questions. So.
Thank you. Before I go to Zoom, do we have any questions from the audience here? And if they come up, we can always do that. Okay, so the first one is having to do with CVs and resumes. So is it better to develop a CV or resume, and does that change based on an industry versus academia position? And what would you say is the ideal length for a resume? I've heard anywhere from 1 to 3 pages. I can start on that one. I have both, and I'm in academia. So I think that academia tends to favor one over the other, maybe, but you still need to use both frequently. So I think it's important to keep both and keep them current, which I am behind on right now with the pandemic and everything and lots of other life factors. But if I could say to do what I say and not what I do, it would be to keep the resume and the CV current whenever you do something that is noteworthy, whether it's getting an award, giving a presentation. You'll forget these things. And I think especially those of us who are yes people that just kind of say yes and do a bunch of things, you forget that you do them, and then you lose the credit for them. So build that resume, and really the CV is longer. So, maybe not everything that goes on the CV goes on the resume, but on my resume, I used to keep just a reminder to keep that in there, right? So for example, this year I did a lot of vaccine presentations to help people understand how the vaccine worked. I didn't even think of putting it on my CV or my resume until one of my mentors, career mentors, mentioned when I reached out in one of those times of like saying, yes, I'm drowning, I need help. And she said, this is something that is noteworthy. Put a reminder on your CV and on your resume that you did this. And then I don't update it with all of the things that I'm doing, but I kept a list of all of the presentations I was giving to the Denver Public Library and the schools, just so that I will remember, because I had recently given birth and I didn't remember a lot of things, right? So keeping that current is really important. Ideal length kind of depends on the position. So I keep the CV as an ongoing list that's like extensive and is like 15 pages at this point, that I can shorten as I need to for what's required for whatever it is, grants, speaking stuff. There's different things that CVs are required for, and they'll say a different length sometimes. And then for the resume, keeping it shorter is better. But you'll probably know for your perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. I completely agree with that. I mean, CVs seem like there is just everything you've ever done. I mean, sometimes people put hobbies and things like that on there, but a resume, I agree with what was said about the resume, but I would like to just add one thing I told Lauren is that you should have like your professional journal and consider like every 2 weeks or weekly writing down your accomplishments. And if anyone's having to deal with imposter syndrome or not feeling good enough or thinking they're not qualified, this is a great reminder at the end of the semester, at the end of the year, at the end of graduate school, at the end of 2 postdocs, all that you've accomplished. And you will forget. You think you'll never forget, all the time you prepare for that presentation or that whatever happened, but you will, you will forget. And once you're in industry, you'll be surprised that they want to know all the things that you've done and you can't remember. So you have to get into the habit of writing these things down. And then later, you can describe them as transferable skills on your resume to say, yes, I'm experienced with managing a budget. Though you may not have had that title of, manager or in finance, you'll see that you have all this experience because you are ordering or you are auditing. Even if it seems small now, these things add up and it's real life experience. Like this is, accumulation of who you are, and you can bring that to your next job. But you miss it if you don't write it down. So it's going to seem awkward. It's going to seem insignificant possibly in the beginning if you're like, I don't know, tissue culture day, but you'll start getting in the habit of recognizing all that you're accomplishing, and you're accomplishing a lot. And I can say that with confidence because you're here and you're continuing to move through the system. So don't deny yourself the opportunity of recognizing that. So a professional journal, I have gone through 3 since I've been at Pfizer. I write down everything, and they are really important to go back to and look at, especially when you need to sell yourself. And it's going to happen all the time when you want a new position, a new role, a new, whatever you're looking for. Yeah.
So I absolutely agree with all that. The only thing that I will add, or maybe even just reframe a little bit, is that I think keeping in mind that there's a purpose to this document. Right. So when you think about your CV and your resume, and so depending on that purpose, that's going to dictate a little bit how you use it. So I think the CV is easy because it just gets longer the more experience you have, right? The sections are pretty well defined. It's presentations, it's publications, it's research projects, it's grants. And so you're just adding as those things go. I love the suggestion for a professional journal to remind yourself of that, keeping those updated for things. I think it's also a good practice to get into of having a master resume, because the biggest difference that I see between a resume and a CV is that the CV is really just kind of the list of the accomplishment. The resume explains what exactly you did with that, right? So we recommend using this, it's actually the NIH that put out this acronym for it, but it's PAR, so problem, action, result. So what were you trying to solve? What did you do? And then what happened because of what you did? So when you're creating these effective bullet points on a resume, that takes a lot of time and energy, right? But if you do that and keep that master resume going, then when you're actually using that for the purpose of applying for a position, that's really when you need to tailor things specifically for the resume, right? Because it may be great that you did all this stuff, but the position doesn't care about that. That's not good to include, right? Because the people that are reviewing that are looking for very specific things to say, should we interview this person? And so that's what you really want to speak to on your resume. And so, having that master document that you can then tailor specifically for the job becomes important for that. But I think all of those additional purposes of reminding yourselves of all the things that you have done, those are really good practices to get into because you forget them. So,
and they can go on the CV, right?
Yeah.
So you can make that as extensive as possible, and then remove things if they're not necessary for any specific thing. But in academia, the CV is going to be used forever because it's used for promotions, it's used for everything. So you can cut and paste from that and put it in other documents, or just use it almost as a journal to say, hey, I did this, so include that in my personal statement now, or something like that. So
and every job you apply for will likely need a different resume, like if it's in industry, because it really needs to be tailored to the job description and what you're applying for. Even if it's a similar role, they may have different emphasis. And so that's the emphasis that needs to be in the resume. So every job gets a new resume. In academia, I think the CV is close, but yeah.
Really tailored to the job. So like Sujatha, I applied to 80 jobs, and each of those I tailored kind of, I read the job description and it says, oh, we're looking for this. And I was like, okay, well then I'm selling myself as that, right? And there will be aspects of you that fit multiple different job descriptions, but you kind of, it's just, you're showing them a different side of you. You're like, do you like this side or this side? So you take you're a big package, you've got a lot going on, and you can just take aspects of that you want to kind of sell. That sounds terrible that you're selling yourself, but you know what I mean. Okay, other questions?
Just one final comment on that, though. I think that idea of it sounds horrible that we need to sell ourselves, that I think is too pervasive in academia, because somehow that's not what we should be doing for things, but that's what you do when you write a grant. Yeah. You're selling it, right? And so I think that self-promotion and getting comfortable with self-promotion, not bragging, right? Not saying things that are unfounded, but being confident that, yes, I do this well, right? Like that idea of promoting yourself, I think is one to get comfortable with. Last thing about length, don't feel like you're limited to one page. Right, that's something that you should push that out the window. If you are working in a research field, if you're doing, especially if you're a PhD student, postdoc, master's student, you've done more than will be captured in one page. So don't feel like you have that limitation.
So we got a couple questions about networking. So the first one. Yeah, but people in Zoom can't hear you unless you have a microphone.
So I guess it was kind of a follow-up for Emily. Like, what kind of things do you use your resume for? You have a resume, and like, how does it differ from your CV? And like, what do you typically use it for?
There are just some grants, like little. They're not all grants are NSF and NIH. And sometimes those grants will ask for your resume. And basically my resume is a shortened version of my CV. So I don't have one that's really that NIH standard. It's just shorter. Like I take the highlights and I don't give as much detail, but I still have, publications. I don't have all of my presentations listed. I have my grants and I have my education. So it's like highlights without being as extensive. Like my CV mentions every single person I've mentored. My master CV does. And then, the resume might say 37 undergraduates, 7 PhD students, 2 master's students, 2 postdocs, right? So it doesn't have their names and their everything about them. It just has numbers of people that I've mentored successfully, right? So it's for, when people are screening and trying to look at, is this person, do they fit the profile of who we want to fund or who we want to have come speak? It just tells them they don't want to read 15 to 17 pages. They just want to see, okay, yeah, this is the real deal. It's not Joe Schmo or whatever.
Hi again. Yeah. I, especially with the audience that we have here today in person and on Zoom, one thing that I think would be really beneficial to hear the three of you talk about from your 3 different perspectives, when you're leaving graduate school, whether you go on to working in industry or in academia, the vast majority of people here are women. And I think that one thing that would be wonderful to hear about is when you're going on to that job, how you advocate for yourself monetarily, position-wise, things like that, how essentially how you can do what your male competitors are already doing. And then also once you're in the job, how are you ensuring that you're not getting excess administrative work or things that they just tend to hand to women, and that you're creating a level playing field in your career, if that makes sense?
I can speak to that from failure to do those things. But I have a really good story that illustrates that. So I didn't, I guess, tell my whole history, but I had a different assistant professor position before I came here. I was the only woman in my department of 40 people, and that was isolating and very challenging. And probably the main reason that I moved, although research opportunities also played a big role in that. And I did not advocate at all for myself when I joined that first position. I just was very excited that someone wanted me and wanted to give me a job. So I didn't negotiate. I said, oh, that's a great salary, I'll take it. That's a great startup package, I'll take it. Great. So that was my first position. And for the second position, which is this one, I did the same thing. And luckily, I had the section head that hired me was an amazing mentor and person altogether. Lee Nicewander, if you ever have a chance to be mentored by her, she's amazing. And she sent me an email back when I said, great, I'll take it. And she said, do you have a minute? I'm going to call you. And then she called me and she said, you are supposed to negotiate. And this is what the male counterpart asked for. And this is the startup package that he asked for. And I do not want to give him more money when he has less experience than you do. So you need to advocate for yourself. And so I didn't ever call you. I didn't ever tell you to do this, but you need to do this. And so I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And like, that is a rare circumstance. That was complete 1 in a million chance that I would have someone that would tell me that. And if that was the case, I would have gotten $25,000 less a year than my male counterpart if she hadn't intervened. And I would have gotten a startup package that was significantly lower than he got. Just because I was just, dealing with the imposter syndrome and just thinking, oh, I'm so glad you think I'm worthy of being hired. And so I would say negotiation is really important. The best thing that helped me was realizing that what other people were asking for. So other people that have done that well have looked up the salaries of other people in that field, or even emailed them directly to ask them, hey, what did you get? Because this is a public university. You can actually look up salaries for hiring. And so I don't want to call out people individually, but I know one assistant professor who, when she was hired, she looked online and she said, okay, this is what the startup package, this is what the starting salary was for the 3 people that started that year. And so she knew she could ask for at least that. So either ask directly for someone that's your level or look it up. And then that way, what is a range that you can look at, where they're not just like, wow, that person really went above what we can do. And then find other junior faculty this is the career I know, so I'll talk to this. But I had other friends that when I got my positions asked me what I started with, and I did the same. Because you have to justify what you're asking for startup, for example. And so you could, so I asked friends then, because I just put the same number as the man, right? I didn't. And so then I asked some friends, hey, how did you break this down? And I copied that basically or tailored it to my own research. So that was for money. As far as administrative tasks, I also failed miserably at that. And so when I started at my first assistant professor job, I had 5 new preparations of curriculum where I actually designed the curricula, whereas my male counterparts had either 0 or 1. 5. I had 5. I wasn't sleeping more than 4 hours a night because I didn't know that I could have had that be part of my agreement to start working there. And so it is so, so important to do what I say and not what I did on that circumstance. So this isn't a teaching university, so it's less of a issue here. But if you are going to a teaching university or somewhere where there are administrative tasks, it should be in writing, like at the negotiation stage. That's what the guys did that I didn't do. And it would have made a world of difference if I hadn't had to spend so much time developing curricula that was taken away from my research. And then they measure you by your research. And they're like, well, why didn't you perform like this person who didn't have any responsibilities, right? So I would say just take note. And again, this is something that you can ask the other people. And I would ask a man what they did and what they had protected, what type of, because historically, from the beginning of time, that is where the privilege has been. And so ask them what they got, and then you ask for the same and get it in writing.
Yeah, same. We had a question too for Lora. And in an industry position, when does that kind of negotiation conversation start? Any advice for what to ask for or when to ask for it?
Exactly. I would say, if you don't know anyone in industry, Glassdoor is a good option for looking at salary ranges. It's getting better and better because more and more people are going in and sharing their experiences, and they'll put what their salaries are. And then, going to Bruce, and say, do you know anyone who has this type of job? So now his network is huge. And then you can see, and if you don't want to ask someone, how much are you making? How much did you start? You can always ask for a range, and then people are comfortable telling you that. What's the starting range for this type of position? What's a competitive, range? What's a competitive package? And then people will share that. And so that's if you can't find it online. And then just don't be afraid to ask for that. And particularly in industry, they're a bit more generous than academia. They probably will give it to you. And then you say, well, I don't know. And then you start talking about all of your great accomplishments, which for years because you've been writing it down in your business journal. So, and then they were like, oh, well, if you've done all of that, then of course. Part of the negotiation industry is your salary, the bonuses. And so at Pfizer, I can speak. For field medical director, the starting range is 150 to 220. And
that's what I make.
Yeah. And so, and that's one thing, like whoever I'm talking to, we have to put it out there because men are discussing this, in their groups. So that's the range. If you don't have any industry experience, it's going to be closer to the bottom than the top. But once you have industry experience, it really moves up. Their bonuses are 20% a year. There's not a lot of negotiation with that because that's like a standard. This type of position gets 20. But once you're in the role, if you're doing well, you can get up to like 40. But that's not in your contract.
I might have to come.
Yeah. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Yeah. And then you have like insurance, the healthcare and things like that. Then the savings plans. And then after you're there for a while, then that even moves up, like the amount they contribute. But I would say Glassdoor, ask other people, ask for a range, then Usually for these industry jobs, they stick to the job description, but you'll have a panel of people you interview with. And then you ask, are there tasks outside of that? What's expected? When are you expected to take on other work? And then you can get those responses from several different people so you'll know if they're asking you to do more. But when you're starting, I would look at what's the team's current composition? Is it close to 50-50? Do you see men and women? Do you see different ethnicities? Because that certainly is a sign that there is a higher level of leadership that's supporting inequities. So it may not change soon, if you don't see it even above your position. And I would definitely look for that. And then once you're hired, you have to get comfortable asking people what type of bonuses they're making or the range. So you'll know if you are being judged like your peers. You'll be familiar with their work. And if they got 35%, and you only got 20, then it's time to get some feedback. So it's challenging because you don't want to have those type of conversations. And we've grown up thinking it's very private, but this is business now. How much you make, so you can be gentle about it, but you just have to put it out there.
Yeah, so I'll just add a couple of things to that. I think absolutely everything that they said, having people who you can go to have these conversations, right? So again, that peer network component, everybody in this room is going to have a job one day, right? And you could be very similar fields, right? Students who have moved on, postdocs who have gone on, having those conversations. But what I would add to that is have those conversations early, right? So sometimes when we're looking at careers, we're just looking at the job and the job opportunity, but we're not evaluating the company and the culture that there is there, right? And so asking those questions ahead of time so that you have an idea, yeah, this place is equitable, the way that Lora was just describing. There is a good composition. They are supportive. Like those are things that you can be asking before you even start applying for the job, right? So that you're not just looking for the type of job you want, but where do you want to work? In addition to that, the more that you can prepare yourself to have those conversations. So for negotiation, Getting to Yes is a great book to read. So Getting to Yes is about rather than positional bargaining, they recommend following the strategy called principled negotiation. So you're talking about, I want this is what I need because, right? And you're not just saying, I need to make this dollar amount, so that you give that company place to, meet you and make you happy, because the company should want to try to make you happy, right? The other thing I'll recommend is there's a book called Women Don't Ask. And it is highlighting the fact that women are less likely to negotiate or ask questions. And it goes through a lot of, historical reasons for those things, but also gives strategies for then how do you ensure that you are pushing back. So I think it's recognizing that you have the concerns about having additional administrative tasks, being given a lower offer, and then how do you push back against some of those things. But I think the best thing that you can do is building out that support network through the process, right? So that you can bounce those ideas off of people. And then in addition to Glassdoor, PayScale is another company or another website that's great for that. If you're looking in Colorado, we also now have the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, which is supposed to make all of this stuff much more transparent in terms of posting salaries, what those salaries equate to for responsibilities, and all of that information is supposed to be very public now. So
yeah.
Can you hear? Is it on? Okay. I'm not sure if this is kind of off topic, but it's just making me think of this. So, at least in my experience, so I actually worked for 2 years in tissue engineering before I started grad school. And something that I remember, because I used to sit on this committee that gave advice to the dean for campus culture and stuff. And I brought up that I noticed women were handed additional administrative tasks and all these things in the university. And obviously all the people who were in super high level positions were all men. And I got a lot of gaslighting. And so how do you approach a situation where you're clearly outnumbered and you're clearly getting gaslit, but you don't want to come off as aggressive or unprofessional? How do you approach something like that?
Yes, this is a huge challenge. I am in this situation too, that if you're ever upset about something and you have the least bit tension in your voice or tone, you're emotional, you're the angry Black lady. These things are a part of our culture, that we're all working to fight. So you're left with being beyond reproach in everything. At least, that's how I feel. You can't show weakness. It's unfair. And in a situation that, all of the leadership, they're males and they're gaslighting you, or they're just saying, Black people are just angry, what do you do? Yes. Or you're just emotional. Is it hormones? Is it time of the month? When, if we look at the current political climate, it's not the women that are emotional, but I digress. I don't have a strategy for changing those men. My strategy is exactly. I was going to say, get your resume together, your CV, and design your out plan. Really, that's exactly what I was going to say. I would just leave that because they're not going to listen, but you definitely will have the burden of not being as expressive, because when you are, you're representing everyone. They don't look at it as, oh, you were angry. They're like, oh, women are so angry. Black people are so angry. But if a man is angry, oh, he's just upset. So in that situation, exactly, some woman made him mad. Bruce, don't feel targeted. But so I would say, reach out to your peers, talk it out. Try to find another option. If you're a student somewhere, it's a long road, but it's a finite amount of time. And you can just use that experience to pick a different experience later. Because I know it's not easy. You can't just be like, oh, just quit your PI, quit your lab, quit your graduate school. You have to work it out. But just know we recognize that. We've experienced it. It is hell. I don't know if they're going to change, but we can just try to identify those cultures and avoid them.
Yeah. I would say your advice to look initially for what you want, right? So if it's an equal distribution of males and females, it's a lot less likely that you're going to run up against that than if it's 1 in 40, for example. So I was loud when I noticed that actually it was more for other people that I saw treated unfairly. So the reason I was the only 1 in 40 was because the one before me got pushed out. It's down from tenure track to an adjunct professor. And so I started making noise about that. And it didn't change anything. But she later got a job that more than doubles her salary. And she's now at Harvard, right? Getting more than double her salary that she was getting as a tenure track professor, from tenure track to like about the same as a student, then to double her salary. So that was the exit strategy. If it is so ingrained in a culture, in a culture of a university or a industry, your one voice is not going to change it. You can make the complaint, and it was probably going to be better once you're already somewhere else to make that complaint. So like make the observations, document them, send them as an email to someone, maybe not your higher ups that have to write your letter of recommendation, but plan your exit strategy. And then from there, I have since, after leaving there, been asked, why did you leave? And I can detail X, Y, Z, P, D, Q, I see something wrong with you, right? And it's all of these things. And and they ended up doing that for a lot of women faculty that went on and were more successful elsewhere. They asked us, well, why did you leave? And we could tell them at that point. But it was much more effective, I think, to say it from the outside than to say it from the inside, because you're still kind of under their power while you're on the inside. Yeah. I don't know.
Bruce, you want to speak on that, or should I go to another?
You can go to another question. The only thing I was going to say though is that I think, you know, trying to identify who are your champions, who are people that you can talk to about that and sharing that experience with them. But then to this point, recognizing when you've encountered a gravity problem. So gravity problem is this idea that, you know, no matter what you do, it's not going to change, right? So like gravity is pulling us down. No matter how much I want to be taller, it's not going to happen, right? So if you have a gravity problem, then change how you approach it, change how you think about it, but don't try to change that thing itself, right? But I think documenting becomes so important for that, and sharing the experience with someone at some point, but focusing on you, because in that situation, that has nothing to do with you, right? That has to do with them. And so when you see that, you know, figure out what's the best for you in that situation.
But it is hard. But it is hard to not think it's something wrong with me, right? Like it's really hard to do that. And so, yeah, it was just so night and day different. Like my, you know, I kind of use people as a mirror of who I am, right? Like the way they respond to me tells me a little bit about who I am, which is it's a very dangerous situation. So if you're surrounded by people that are kind of treating you like you have no value, you just have to get out of there so that you can be in a place that mirrors you better. Jem, do you have a question?
Then I'm going to go to some Zoom questions.
So basically kind of two things that I kind of end up sort of pairing together oftentimes would be like basically a lot of both academic and like industry type things are pushing for like diversity. But then there's also kind of questions about professionalism and how basically there's like a gender bias of expectations between, you know, men, women, or other individuals. And so basically like my question really is like, how do you like handle sort of these additional like pressures and or like expectations in the sense of like, oh, like you're supposed to wear like a certain like business casual for women versus business casual for men, or if you're gender variant, like how do you like, how would that fit into that? And then like kind of in tandem, it's like, oh, if you're having hiring committees and you have that like token women of color or, you know, token queer person or whatever, like how are you supposed to navigate all of these like additional sort of things pulling on you?
Yeah, so if you are being interviewed or if you're at the company and they're behaving like that, which perspective? Which perspective are you asking about? Like if you are being interviewed and you feel like the panel, they just threw in a Black woman, but you really wouldn't be working with her because it just wants to show you a Black face. Is that what you mean? Or if you're at the company and you know they're behaving like that, how do you navigate it? Yeah, I know that's basically, you know, why we have this support group, right? To just give us the strength to recognize it could be an issue and to be strong enough to deal with it. The more that we are present and we show up, the more people are going to say, you know, we are valuable and part of the society. At Pfizer, maybe 3-4 years ago, got a new CEO. He was already at the company, but he's the CEO now. And so he has started, you know, really pushing equity. That's like one of our pillars, and courage to speak up. And they seem to really now are trying to, you know, for Pfizer to be a home for everyone, right? So we celebrate, you know, everything. If what happens if the company you're applying to is not like that? What happens, you know, if you're at a conservative like university? It's a real challenge. I think you have to be brave and you just have to show up and you have to ask, you know, can we have this day? You know, there was a time when we really didn't have a postdoc association, right? So Bruce and I were it was in the early years when we were on there. There wasn't even representation for postdocs, white male postdocs, So, so you have to be brave and know you're valuable and you should be supported, whatever your identity is, and then ask for that. And eventually someone will listen, even not if at this particular company or this university. Now we have a postdoc association. Now we have women in STEM. We didn't always have that. When I was a graduate student, there wasn't a women in STEM. So you have to put the needs out there. This is what I need. This is what a whole group of us need. This is what everyone needs, because we all need to be supported. I think we should just start there, and the call could be answered.
Did you also have a question about attire? I thought I heard something about that. Was that also part of it? Combination. Okay. So for attire, I would say, there are some kind of in-between outfits, right? So I think you can, business casual has a wide range of what that can mean. I like to wear dresses. I wear dresses quite frequently as a woman, and I think that can be business casual, or it can be going for fun, doing something else, right? But a lot of times when I do kind of more professional things, I tend to wear something that's a little bit, kind of more gender neutral, I would say. But I don't know that you have to. So I also sometimes wear dresses, I guess. I think you don't want it to be the loudest part about you. You want people to notice what you're saying and what's coming out of your head more than what your attire is. And so, at this point, I kind of struggle just to be not covered in baby goop, like right here, right? So as long as I'm that, I feel pretty professional at this point in my my career. But that should only be should be only another little while. But I would say, trying to just be kind of clean and professional looking, and not have it be really loud, and that's the main thing people notice, right? So, because you really want them to be concentrating on what you're saying and what's coming out of your mouth, and that rather than what you're wearing. So, yeah.
And then I completely understand. We don't necessarily have a culture. If people look at you and see male and you want to wear a dress, there's still going to be some pushback. Even if I decided to braid my hair, it's not always considered, quote, professional. Just like if people look at you and see male, they don't think it's professional for you to wear a dress. We still have these barriers. And I would say you have to, if that's who you are, and what you're comfortable in, just make sure it's a fabulous dress, but you have to be prepared, for the fallout. And it's the same thing, if I decide, to braid my hair, now we have laws that I can't be fired for it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be uncomfortable.
Well,
yeah.
Or that it's a bias that impacts whether you get hired, right? So, yes, I guess, I do, yeah. I do like wearing dresses, and when I was on the job market, I was a marathon runner. I had fabulous legs, so I could have worn a short skirt and been showing those off, but would that be professional? And is that what I want them to notice? It's not, right? So I would not wear a short skirt that revealed my legs. Instead, that's kind of something I've dropped as having children and being an assistant professor, but I would, have it be that they're noticing what's coming out of your head, because that's what you're getting hired for, right? And the other stuff that's distracting, you don't really want that to be an aspect. You want to eliminate the bias as much as you can. Another example on this is also kind of personal experience, but like I am not a person that wears makeup almost ever. Like I just don't have time for it. But there was a study that came out that wearing makeup for women, a certain amount, not too much, not too little, kind of a little amount, impacts whether you get hired after an interview. So I went to a makeup shop and I had people pick out the makeup, show me how to apply it before I went on the job market. You know, you have to kind of read what the biases are. Is that fair? No. Is it even, it's ridiculous, honestly, right? But I still didn't want that to be what kept me from getting a good job where I'd be happy. So I wear it when I interviewed, I wear it when I give a professional presentation, when I'm going to be in front of people, but I don't wear it to lab every day, right? It's not like taking a big amount of my time, but like when I know that I'm going to be judged on my appearance, which is pretty much whenever you're going to be in front of people, then I put it on a little tiny bit. Still, it's not a lot, a little tiny bit. So I guess that kind of speaks to that, right? Like you want to try and minimize the biases that exist. I also wear a little bit of a heel because they say height matters. And so like I don't ever do it in lab, but sometimes, you know, when it's like really going to matter, you know, I still make sure I can walk, but it's less, something like that. So I do think appearances do matter, unfortunately.
Bruce, do you have anything you had for the initial question or any makeup comments?
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
The only thing I wanted to add to that is that I really want everyone who is here today to remember that you have choices with where you apply your skills, right? Like as you're in training. And so this goes back to that, like doing that research ahead of time about where is a good environment for me? So when you encounter some of these things, that may not be a place that's really going to value you, right? And so before pushing to have that job, that you have other options, right? This is the thing when you start thinking about it early. Here's what I really want to do. Then you can start looking at, well, where's the place where I want to do that thing? Because I think that, yes, absolutely. All of these things are additional challenges and difficulties to the whole process of trying to navigate finding a job. That's a hard enough thing on its own. But you don't have to push for having a job at that place where they're not supportive of you or accepting of you in that way. So I think that's the one thing to remember, right, is that there's no shortage of things you can do with your skill set. There's no shortage of companies that would love to have you on board. The challenge is just finding them. But if it doesn't feel right, don't force it, because if you do, you're likely not going to be set up to be successful there when you get the job anyway.
So we have a couple questions on Zoom about networking. So the first one says, what are good ways to build your network, particularly during this pandemic? And then another one asks, how do you network when you feel like you cannot connect because of race, sexuality, socioeconomic differences?
Well, can you repeat the last question you said?
Yeah. How do you network when you feel like you cannot connect because of race, sexuality, or socioeconomic differences?
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. I think that you have to approach networking like you are making friends or you want a new friend. Don't think this is a person who's going to get me to a job. That's not very welcoming. And maybe, people don't want to feel used. They want to feel like you're interested in who they are. And regardless, people in a group like this, there's going to be someone that's interesting, that's going to be supportive. And so you're making friends. You're just making new friends quickly. So that's like the networking thing. So don't, regardless of, your gender or your sexuality or your ethnicity, there are lots of wonderful friends out there. And so think of it that way. And you are also bringing something to the table. So it's not just that you're coming, are you hiring? Do you know someone who's hiring? Do you have a company that can hire me? It's you're giving, it's a two-way street. You're sharing. That person needs friends too. That person needs a new connection. Want support. We need people of all ages around us. And so you are valuable and an asset to whoever you are meeting. Even if they're the CEO or the dean of the medical school, that person wants to be engaged with other humans too, or they wouldn't be at that event. So approach it like that. And I would say there are organizations that are still doing virtual type events. Check their websites. Like we had the Women in STEM networking event online. So you have to go to those things, check other organizations, the biotech company. So there's still things that are happening virtually. And then use your camera to show your face so you can see who the other people are. It's hard like this because once we walk out of here, if I see you without the mask, I'm not going to really know you. But online, at least you can see everyone. And then you can follow up and say, hey, once this is over, can we get coffee? Let's continue to email and share information. You said something interesting. Have you read this book? Or what do you think about this book? These are the kind of things that you can say to people who you don't know very well to get a dialogue going, even if it's over email. And then eventually we'll be able to see each other face to face. So we can all walk out on the sidewalk and take our masks off. Isn't that right? Yeah. So then we can see each other. So suggest things like that.
Yeah. I handed the microphone over as soon as you said networking during the pandemic, because I think what a challenge. And I just want to acknowledge that for all of us, that has been a huge challenge. And I don't think that there's a great solution. I think Laura's solutions are as good as I mean, that's better than I can come up with. But I would say, just to second that being genuine and being interested in people is the biggest thing that you can do. So, that's very much an emotional connection. So listening to what the other person's saying, being interested and asking questions, and then popping in with your connections to that, and what just being interested in other people is what makes those connections real and genuine.
Okay, so just like the CV and the resume, what is the purpose of networking? Are you looking to expand your understanding of career options? Are you trying to build, social connections, social supports? Like, first identify what you're trying to do with networking, and then you can approach it a little bit differently. So if it's looking to build support, get involved with an organization, right? If you're a trainee on campus, there is Academia Industry Alliance, which is industry focused. There is Project Bridge, that is science communication focused. There is Women in STEM, obviously. There's the Postdoc Association. There's so many different organizations where people are interested in that topic, right? And so when you participate with those organizations, now you're rallying together around trying to do this thing, and you're setting the stage for those natural networking relationships to develop. I'll go back to this. Lora and I were on the Postdoc Association together, right? I found out about the job I have right now because of somebody else who was on the Postdoc Association. I had emailed her to send out an email about looking for lecturers in the psychology department. And she was like, oh, we're looking for somebody to run the postdoc office if you know anybody who's interested, right? And I was like, oh, so right, you find out about opportunities. That's what networking is. But coming together around that shared interest is a great way to start that process, because networking really is relationship building. Now that's true, right? Like, so if you are specifically some aspect of your identity, there are groups on campus that are focused on different aspects of different dimensions of diversity, different dimensions of identity. So you can find those organizations specifically for that, right? So there are lots of ways where you can put yourself together with people that are interested in similar things. If you are looking for career networking things, informational interviewing is what I talk about all the time, because what you're doing in an informational interview is you're just asking somebody for advice. Lora, being an MSL sounds super cool. You don't get paid very much, but that's, I'd like to learn more about that. Would you tell me how, about your path? Would you give me advice about how to move into that, right? So you're not going to that person saying, do you know of any job opportunities? And the fact that I say, hey, I think what you do is really cool, guess what? I just made her feel good because I just said, I think what you do is really cool. So it's that value piece. So it's a great way to start the foundation for some of that networking.
I have a question kind of based off that. What is your kind of opinion, especially in the pandemic, of like cold calling via LinkedIn or trying to connect with people who have no idea who you are, pretty much?
So LinkedIn is for that purpose. The whole point of LinkedIn is networking and cold call. If you are asking somebody to connect, so being authentic and transparent, right? The thing that annoys me most is like, hey, we'd love to collaborate. And I say, sure. And then they're like, you want to buy this product? I'm like, no, that's not collaborating, right? But if you say, I am currently a student in biochemistry and I'm trying to figure out what the next steps in my career are, I'm trying to grow my network, people will accept that. Send a personalized note when you ask that connection to set that context. But then follow up and say, hey, because this is the thing about in the pandemic too. I can do that informational interview with somebody who's in New York or California, right? Because it's all virtual and everybody's comfortable with that now. So when you ask for that through LinkedIn saying, hey, I think this is really cool and Regeneron sounds like a great company to work at. Would you tell me more about those experiences? Could we find a time to talk? You can do that just the way that you would even if we weren't in a pandemic. In some ways, I think people are more comfortable with it. Zoom wasn't really a thing pre-pandemic, right? So I think that, getting comfortable with that, know what your ask is and know what you're trying to do, but do that stuff again early before you need to be in a position of saying, and do you know of any opportunities? Or do you know who the hiring manager is so I can personalize my cover letter, right? It's approaching this not as what can that person do for me, but why should they know me, right? Like, why am I a good person to know? Because I'm inquisitive, because I know something about this field, because I like their posts on LinkedIn. All of those kinds of things can reinforce that. So,
but if you're working with academia, LinkedIn, though you can find people on LinkedIn, I would email their academic address because I don't ever go on LinkedIn. Very rarely. I go in to find the updates on, where someone is that I trained 10 years ago, right? So that's what I go onto LinkedIn for. So you can find the person on LinkedIn, but then I would email their academic email address. And if they don't respond, especially right now with the pandemic, send another email like 4 days later and just say something like, I know my email might have fallen down in the inbox, black hole. I just wanted to send you a reminder. I was curious about this or whatever. So I have actually that is true. I have mentored people who are undergraduates trying to apply to graduate school, who are at different universities, who live in other states through this pandemic, that just emailed me and said, "Hey, I'm interested in coming there for graduate school. Can we talk?" And so, so that is actually a good thing to do. And the same thing for a postdoc. Like before you actually apply, you say, "I'm interested in these things that you do. I've read this paper and that paper, and your lab looks really interesting to me. Can we talk over Zoom?"
I agree. I have a lot of people that I've never met reach out to me on LinkedIn and they'll say, "Oh, I want to be an MSL or I want to work at Pfizer. May I ask you a few questions?" And I always respond. And then if someone doesn't respond, it's a small effort. It's not like a ding against you. So I would say try it. If you want to hear about a job or hear about a company or just get someone's feedback that you don't know, because Bruce is right. It's supposed to be for business, networking, connections. So just throw it out there. And don't worry about it if they never respond. Some people don't respond, but it just seems in waves. Like sometimes it's like twice a week, someone will reach out, but whoever it is, I just think back. I was like, I remember when I was a graduate student and I was desperate to get out. And then I answer. So
but do have mercy on people during the pandemic, because I really like Suja was saying earlier, if you are a mom, and it is particularly moms, not as much dads, as the research shows, if you are a mom of young children right now and trying to keep a career going, it is like barely keeping your nose above the water right now. So if someone fails to respond to an email, just send a reminder, because it's not that they want to ignore you. Like, it is so important to me to be helpful to people. But, you know, my nose is like this much above the water right now. So anyway, it's never a bad thing to just say, hey, it shows persistence. Yeah.
So I want to get to the last two Zoom questions before we end. So one specifically for Lora, and she asked, do you have any tips of how you would recommend designing a PhD program geared towards wanting a career as an MSL postgrad?
Okay, yeah. So I think your actual PhD will be determined by your PI. I mean, not your PI, but the project. So they're going to decide what type of project. But to make yourself competitive, I would say start looking at MSL job descriptions at different companies and see the reoccurring themes, and then see how you can incorporate that in your experience as a PhD student. For example, and I think Bruce alluded to this earlier, so I knew in graduate school I didn't want to be at the bench. I wanted to be in, I described it as I want to talk about science, but I don't want to do science. So then I asked people, what kind of job is that? And they were like, oh, it sounds like a medical science liaison. And at the time I had never heard of it. So I was like, perfect. Well, that's what I want. I just want to talk about the science. And basically that's what we do. We just talk about the science and the data behind therapies for a pharmaceutical company to different physicians that are practicing. And so I started looking at job descriptions, and a lot of them will say you need 2 to 4 years experience. My way around that was to describe the list that's in the job description, to describe what they're asking for in my resume, for them to see I'm already doing that. So if they asked for medical expertise, of course you need that, and you will have that if you're a PhD. So I was interested in being in oncology, so I designed my postdoc to be in oncology. So I was in a division of medical oncology, and you'll see that a lot of it says clinical experience. As a PhD, that's not entirely relevant for us because we're not clinicians. So I made sure I volunteered and worked with clinicians in the hospital. So clinical experience, check. Is it quite meaningful? No, because I'm not a clinician, I'm not a nurse, I'm not an MD, but they asked for clinical experience. I'm with a clinician, I'm in the hospital, that's experience. So you can craft these things, and it's real. So I have an MD that I'm with in the hospital. They asked for collaboration, understanding of, this medical expertise, check, I'm a PhD. So I'm an expert in oncology. They ask for, your ability to communicate scientific information. So how do you show that? Well, you're constantly giving presentations, you're doing journal club as a PhD and a postdoc. You are at scientific meetings, you're giving presentations. So you put that in there, check. And you describe it the way it's written in the job description. That's why each job will get its own resume. Then, they talk about collaborating with medical information. These are industry terms. These are the people who write scientific documents they send out to doctors. Medical information or sales, medical affairs. You're doing the constant collaboration. So I wanted to demonstrate that. So there's a bioscience committee here at the university. I became a member. We are collaborating to approve recombinant DNA research on campus. So if you're in basic science, you have to submit that once a year for all of your recombinant DNA. I was one of the members on that committee. There's a layperson, that's a community person, a veterinarian, scientists, graduate students, so it's cross-functional collaboration, reviewing scientific information, check. And so I just looked at all the things that they're describing, and I said, I'm really doing all of that now. Then you just have to make sure they understand that. So I did the ordering in the lab. And when I was a postdoc, I think this is key, asked my PI if he could be the director and I could be the director of laboratory operations. And he said yes. Now, what does that mean? It was just that discussion. There's no HR, there's no paperwork, but he agreed. So then that's what I called my title instead of postdoc. So all of a sudden now I seem like a big shot at the Anschutz campus with my resume. And anyone who they would talk to said yes. And so then he was like, you're director of laboratory operations, I'm the director. He even liked that better than PI. So, I mean, it worked, it worked out. So I had one postdoc and then director of laboratory operations where, I'm managing budgets, I'm collaborating on the bioscience committee, I'm doing all these things, which sounds like an industry job. So I think you have to be creative. Someone said, oh, it sounds like you need a creative writing degree. Well, consider taking one. So, or at least a class, and think outside the box. That's why writing down what you're doing regularly, looking at job descriptions, you'll see how it really fits, and then speak the language of the description when describing it.
Okay, so we'll do one last question for Bruce. So is the transition to kind of an administrative role one you saw while you were going through your scientific PhD and postdoc, or how did that come about? And is it something you foresaw for yourself, or did it just kind of organically come about?
Yeah. So first comment I want to make is I told you she understated her brilliance, right? Like the calculated nature with which Lora was like, I am going to be an MSL for Pfizer in this region at this time in my life. I fumbled my way into my career. So looking back now, I did a lot of things that had I paid attention to them, I would have realized that administration is something I would have enjoyed. I went to what I was interested in doing, right? So I liked being in lab, I liked doing research, so I did my postdoc on the Denver campus where there are 10 postdocs about down there now. When I was there weren't any other postdocs. So it was me. I tell the story all the time. So for all the postdocs, I apologize. It was me in the basement with the undergrads and the rats. And I was lonely. And so I got involved with the Postdoc Association because I didn't have any other postdocs to interact with. And so I was drawn for that purpose. But what I found was, hey, I actually kind of like going to meetings. And I like looking at, what is this shared collective experience and how can we make it better? And what kind of programs can we build? And what could we do here, right? And so, and then I did an informational interview with the dean of the grant school. We didn't talk about it that way then, but it was, how do you get into administration? Do I have to be a full faculty member first? How do you move it? What do you do, right? So I started to do all of these things, but without any intention. And so this is where I look at the experience that Lora had, the experience that a lot of my other peers had, and my own experience to say, you know what? If we just put this together with intentionality, when you start reflecting on what do you like doing? What are the jobs that allow you to do that thing? Who are people that are doing that you can talk to build that network? How do you test that out a little bit by getting involved with an organization? All of a sudden, there's clarity around what kind of career you would really find most rewarding. So I didn't approach it with intentionality. And so it took a lot of twists and turns and dark days and depression and feelings of failure and all of that kind of stuff before I landed in something that ultimately is the perfect job for me. I absolutely love what I do. I enjoy what I do 90% of the time, which I think is very rare, right? But that wasn't with intentionality. I think if you approach it now and you have that opportunity, and so this would be kind of my closing message to folks, right? Is that I want to support everyone staying in academia as long as academia continues to give you reasons to stay, right? That's what I worry about, is that this place is not a lot of the things that it once was or that it should be. And until we start changing that, right, it's up to you to decide whether you want to continue to stay. But don't feel like you have to, because there are a lot of things that you can do. You have a lot of options. The training that you get here is transferable to a lot of different careers. Academia is not one monolithic thing either, right? Like I have an academic career. I enjoy university settings, right? But I don't run my own lab anymore. You may really enjoy the research process, but you don't want to be the one who is PI, right? So there are core director positions. There are staff scientist director positions. You may find that you really like teaching, and a teaching intensive career is more something you want. There's so many things within academia that we don't even talk about. CU Innovations has like 3 or 4 different PhDs on staff there who do venture development and run programming for that, right? There are opportunities. We should have a PhD in advancement. There should be somebody there who is working with our advancement team, right? So it's about figuring out, what do you really like doing? There's not one path. There's not one path for you. And you get to decide, how are you going to shape your career? So I didn't do that intentionally. Had I done that, I think I would have saved myself some headaches, maybe not more time. I may not have got here any quicker than I did, but I certainly would have had more purpose and not felt like I was, this uncertainty of what am I going to do with my life? So I didn't do it with intentionality, but I accidentally did all those things correctly that I should have been doing. That Lora sat down as a third-year PhD student, was like, all right, here's what I'm doing, here's where I'm going, right? So that would be my closing message from this, is, networking, negotiation, CV, all that kind of stuff starts with, well, what do you want to do? And so that's what I would challenge all of you to think about. What in science do you enjoy doing the most? Once you have that in mind, then you can start charting that path.
Great, thank you. Do you guys want to have any closing remarks? If not, it's fine. We're a little bit over on time, so.
It's been a pleasure. I think everyone has my email. It should be in that brochure. Feel free to reach out if you have questions or you want to talk later.
I would just say that probably a lot of us feel that we're kind of stumbling our way through. So I too think that I did always want to be a professor and want to be, a professor. But there were a lot of times, I would say the majority of the time, that I didn't know if that would pan out. Which I think is fairly common. I didn't realize that when I was a PhD student, that other people thought that as well. But I did always notice that what I loved the most was the human interactions and mentoring. So even when I was a graduate student, I was mentoring undergraduate students, and that I found that part really rewarding. And so I always knew that I needed that to be part of my career. So noticing what it is that you like about what you're doing, and moving towards that, I think is what is in common between all of us. And those were different. I hate going to meetings, so I would not be a good administrative person. Like, please, you can take all of my faculty meetings and that'll be just fine. So like noticing what really is fulfilling to you. Is it getting the result at the bench? Is it, writing? Is it communicating? Is it seeing people's eyes light up as they learn something? Noticing what it is that is fulfilling to you. And there's not a right or wrong answer to that. And then just, filling that thing, moving towards that and writing down what it is that you're doing that's building that skill set. Okay. Thank you guys.
You can leave it on. I'll talk into it. All right. So now we're going to have a little raffle and a 10-minute break. If you guys want to use the restroom, get coffee or drinks. If you do win the raffle, we'll email you. So let me go grab Lauren for the raffle. Yeah, we'll do one t-shirt now and some stickers. If you guys don't win, or if you're interested in buying them later, we do have it all available on our website as well. So the first winner of a t-shirt is Christina Como. Woohoo! Is she here?
I think she's on Zoom.
Okay. Yeah, some of these. Okay, so we're going to give 3 stickers now. So the first winner is Kristen Ball. Woo!
Congrats.
They're up front, so we'll grab. The second one is Fabian Galley. She might be on Zoom.
Yeah.
And then I guess we're giving 10, so we'll do 5 now.
8.
Yelena Crisoho.
She's here, right? She was.
Okay, well, they could have gone in the bathroom or something too.
All right. Good one.
The next one is
Bruce.
Bruce. We'll give him a sticker.
I did put the stickers on there.
That's fine.
6 is Gemma Martin.
Gemma Martin. Yay! Okay, you guys won some stickers.
All
Thank
right.
you. Okay, so we'll come back in like 5 minutes. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started with Allison and Reena, and they're gonna talk about their experiences both as a recent graduate going into a postdoc position, staying in academia, versus an industry position. So how this is going to go is we're going to have them initially introduce themselves, but then we're going to have a series of questions where each of them can give their experience on it. And then at the end, we will take any questions. So let me give each of you one of these. So we're going to start with just a quick introduction about your current position, maybe where you got your degree from, or your background. So Allison, if you want to go ahead.
Hey, I'm Allison. I am originally from New Jersey, and I did undergrad at Lehigh University, and I went straight from my undergraduate into my PhD program at Brown in molecular cell bio and biochemistry. And after that, I was like done with science. I didn't have the best PhD experience, but maybe I was also a little bit burnt out from just going through school my whole life. And yeah, I wanted to kind of try something different. So I spent like 6 months in Israel doing a ecological farming program. And actually I moved out to Colorado originally to work on an organic farm. And after kind of a couple years, I kind of missed science and also kind of realized it's hard to kind of make money and do farming as a business. And I just also miss like studying biology and asking fun questions. So I decided to come back to science. And originally I wasn't like committed to doing a postdoc, but I think based on my goals, a lot of my mentors had kind of encouraged me to try that route and go that route. And so, yeah, now I've been in my postdoc here for like over almost 5 years. So a little bit of a long postdoc, but I'm currently applying to academic faculty positions. And so, yeah, that's kind of my path.
Hi, guys. My name is Reena Berman, and I graduated from the toxicology program.
Is your green light on?
Yeah.
Do I have to push it? Let me try this one. It doesn't sound like it's coming.
Hello.
Here, do you mind using this one?
Hi. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I graduated from the toxicology program in 2020. Before that, I was working at National Jewish Health just down the road from here, and that's actually where I did my thesis research. So I was sort of between both campuses, but that's where I know Kendra from. I went to Boston University for my undergrad, and I worked for 4 years in between graduating and getting my PhD. And then I finished June 2020, and then in September 2020, I started at Novartis Gene Therapies in the site up in Longmont that I think a lot of people who want to be in industry in our region know about this because it's changed hands a bunch of times, and it actually shut down when like about 6 months after I started. So I internally transferred, and now I'm a regional medical director at the same company, but that basically means an MSL. So I think you guys just got a pretty good overview of what that means. And still live in Denver, and my territories are just the Mountain West states.
If you guys don't mind, can we smush your seats to right in front of the podium? The people on Zoom want to see you. We got a comment. Right in front of me, like where that panel was. It was right there, yeah. Let me see if it's now. Yes. All right, so our first question for them is, when did you know what career path you wanted to take after graduate school? Or did you know while you were in graduate school?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I still don't know. Yeah, it's really hard to decide. I think there's like so many options out there and so many possibilities, as Bruce was saying, even like within academia. And yeah, as Suja mentioned, like some days I'm ready to like leave academia and close the door behind me. But, you know, there's always those kind of bad days of like where things don't come together. And then there's good days where good things happen. So, yeah, I think it's an ongoing like decision process, honestly. And what's helped me kind of move forward with things is kind of like changing my mentality about it. And like, I've always kind of struggled with long-term plans and like long-term goals and things like that. And I think it's because like, it's hard to see yourself like that far away from where you currently are. But like, yeah, what's kind of helped me is not thinking of things in such a permanent way, and that like every decision I make doesn't have to be like my permanent decision or permanent role. And so, yeah, I'm more of like a very short-term planner, but I would say I have maybe like up to a year planned ahead. But yeah, even when I was decided to come back to science, I was applying to like PRA positions, research associate positions. I wasn't committed, I would say, to like coming and doing a postdoc, but I think I did ultimately. I saw a lot of professors that I aspired to be and kind of like admired their position and role. And I think like the flexibility of academia and kind of the structure of it has helped me kind of push me in that direction. And also realizing that I enjoy teaching, and I've tried to, you know, find teaching opportunities. That's kind of helped me move forward in deciding these career paths. So I would say like, what helped me do a postdoc is realizing like, okay, this is a temporary position and I'll kind of figure out what I want to do next from there.
So I'm kind of the complete opposite. And I interned in the medical affairs department at a biotech when I was an undergrad. So I've actually wanted to be an MSL since I was 19. So I've wanted this for a really long time, and these are not easy jobs to get. So it was just sort of what do I need? You need a PhD, an MD, or a PharmD to get it. So I knew I needed that. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to go to grad school. I knew I didn't want to be in academia. It just was not for me. Like in that day one of grad school orientation where they ask you if you want to do a postdoc, I very confidently said no, because I did not want to do a postdoc. It just really wasn't for me. And I also felt like I'd been in lab for like 10 years and I just felt ready to leave lab. I feel like I've done what I could there, and I was just ready to expand my horizons. But at the same time, I graduated during COVID, didn't really have the pick of the litter in jobs, and I was happy where I ended up. It was good, valuable experience. And I made connections that were able to help me make this transfer into my dream career. So I just always wanted it, and just very goal driven, tried to figure out what to do to get there. Really wanted this job. I'm very happy.
Yay. Okay, so Reena, why did this career path stand out to you?
So it sounds weird to say, but I feel like every little budding scientist in school decides one day they want to be a doctor, but I actually never wanted to be a doctor because I really don't want to kill anybody. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to get closer to patients and helping patients. And I feel like the MSL role is really a great way to do that because I'm not holding anyone's life in my hands, but I am able to provide the information to the healthcare practitioners that work directly with these patients. So if they need to know something about a drug or a disease or an experience, they can ask me for it. And then I can help them and help educate. So I feel like I'm still working towards patients, but I'm not responsible for anyone's life. I really do not want to be. That's really it. It sounds weird, but that's what it is for me.
And Allison, what kind of inspires you or motivated you when you looked at those professor positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I just really like mentoring students and helping them. And that's kind of what has driven me forward in this career. I think the research is fun, but I wouldn't say it's my top passion that's driving me forward. But I guess I'm good at creating research plans and getting grants. And so that helps. But yeah, I think my passion really is the teaching and mentoring part of just I think having that influence on students and helping them achieve what their goals is what I love the most, I guess, about my career path.
So what did both of you do in graduate school to prepare you for your current position, or what you thought you wanted to do, Allison?
So, I mean, despite my somewhat negative, I wouldn't say my graduate school experience was completely negative. I had a pretty successful graduate career. I actually, we do our 3 rotations in graduate school, and I made kind of a cool discovery in one of my rotations, and that's what helped me to decide to join that lab. It was oh, I have this awesome project and so many questions that I can now ask about this cool thing that I found. And so that also helped me to publish early in my grad school. And, I had 2 first author papers, a handful of second or, co-author papers. And I got a F31 fellowship. So I applied to an NSF, applied to F31. And I think that was definitely helpful. And yeah, definitely, I think even though when I applied to my current postdoc position, I'd been out of the lab for 2.5 years. I was still able to kind of pick up my PhD project and go back to it and, come and present it at an interview. And I think, my credentials were kind of strong in that sense that even though I hadn't been in the lab in 2.5 years, my advisor was still kind of willing to take a chance on me and take me into the lab because of those kind of positives that I did have from grad school.
I have a follow-up. Is your postdoc positions you applied for from networking during grad school, or were they, I don't want to say random, but random?
Great question. Yeah, I was had an unusual postdoc search, I would say. So I was living in Boulder at the time that I was living up on a farm in northern Colorado when I applied to my first postdoc position. But I would say at that point, I wasn't 100% committed to going back to academia. I was still I'm not totally sure, but I'll give it a try. And so I think the person that interviewed me for that position kind of sensed that. And so I didn't get that position. Then about a year later, I kind of fully made the decision, this is what I want to do. I'm going to find a position. And so I applied to a couple of labs at Boulder. The first one was completely different from like anything I had ever done, working in like a different system, using different techniques. And I got an interview, but it was just not the right fit. And so I didn't end up getting that position. And actually I didn't hear back after that interview for like months about it. And I had already got my other position. But sometimes that'll happen in academia. And then the other position was for more of like a tech position where I would just be like helping another postdoc produce a lot of proteins for his project. And again, I got to like the second round of interviews, but again, it just wasn't kind of like the right fit for my goals or for what they were looking for. And so what I ended up doing was a Google search for yeast research in Colorado. And because I was like, okay, I worked on yeast, I'll find a more similar lab that works on yeast. And so, yeah, I didn't realize that like at the med school, there was like basic science like that going on. And so I was happy, I found the BMG department, and I looked on their lab website who was like working on yeast, and found my current advisor. I just thought his research looked cool. And yeah, I just sent him an email and said, like, this is my background, like your research looks cool. And it turned out that he had just gotten some funding and grants. And so the stars kind of aligned in that way. And that's how I got this position.
And Reena, what did you do in grad school to prepare you for your current position, whether it be in school and networking?
I didn't really do anything for it specifically, but my project was a little more like disease focused and like a little more clinical, and I think that was helpful, and I like kept it towards like trying to benefit like patients in need. So I think that did help. A lot of what's involved in MSL, we still do in grad school. Like we do journal clubs and you still read a lot of papers. So just reading everything you can, and then just always like if you have downtime, reading papers, I think really helps. But I didn't really do anything specific, and I'm not a very good networker, but it gets easier as you like have more to talk about, because I feel like in a lot of places, no one really cares if you're a grad student, if you're one in a million grad students. So I don't know. I'm trying to network, so I'm happy to try and like give back, but I'm not good at networking.
So when you transitioned into like a job search phase, did you rely on just like a general search like Allison, or reach out to people you knew were MSLs?
So I didn't think I had very much hope getting an MSL position straight out of grad school. And I do think I was right in that, because they really want you to have experience in it. And it's one of those things where how are you going to get experience to get it? So that's really tough. But for like, I wanted to go into industry. So I was desperate to talk to anyone I could in industry. So I just sort of went through all of my connections and like people I knew. And especially I was not willing to move either. So finding industry jobs in Colorado is not very easy, but I keep a list of who I know who works where. So that way, if someone asks me for help, I can point them to people. And then when I needed to find a new job 6 months after I got the first one, I already like knew who to circle back to. So that was a little bit easier for me.
All right. Our next question. Did you feel confident and competent when you were applying for your current position?
My first one I did, because it was another lab role. For this one, it's very different, but I think you just have to go in with confidence. And then if you're coming out of it with, everyone's pretty smart. If you're a woman in STEM, you're going to be really smart. So I think everyone should just present themselves as strong and confident and as smart as you really are. And I think people can really tell, because if you don't seem very confident, then people are going to just like assume you're not. And yeah, I think that really happens. And interviews are hard, but the more calm you are, then I think that really helps too. So definitely practice. Don't go into stuff blind, ever, never.
I don't think there's always some element of like nervousness and imposter syndrome, I think, no matter where you are. But I guess like my mom really instilled in me, like, fake it till you make it. And I think I'm unusual in the scientist realm, on that, like, I like networking with people and I like, talking with people. So I feel like maybe I wasn't confident when actually applying, but when I come to an interview, I can like have some level of confidence and like can talk with people like about science. And I think even, yeah, I mean, especially after like 2.5 years of like not being in science and not being in the lab, I think it's scary to like come back into that world and then like start talking science again with people. And I think like reaching out to people and complimenting them and their work is the advice I always give to people, because anyone likes getting complimented about their work, and like that's a way to kind of open the door of communication. But yeah, I think in terms of like confidence, like I guess just like reminding yourself like of your achievements and emphasizing them can be helpful, I think.
Going off of that, how were your guys' kind of interview and negotiation processes different going off the panel we just saw too?
Yeah, I mean, like the interview, it was like a full day of like meeting with a bunch of faculty members in the department, meeting with students in the lab. So it was a pretty packed day. And like, I don't know, coming from living a life on the farm, it was definitely quite the contrast. And I did question even after the interview, is like, oh my God, like, can I really do this? Like rejoin society in some ways. But yeah, I think like, you just kind of like go for it and see what happens. And yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but hopefully.
Yeah. What about you, Reena?
I've only done the job search through COVID times. So I had one in-person interview, and it was last summer, like the summer before this last one. I just thought it was weird. They had this like masks off with eating, and I was just very uncomfortable that whole time. So never actually done an official in-person. I never had to present my thesis. Went through this process twice. But I do think it's a little bit easier if you're at home, because you're like comfortable. You're in your house. You can wear your slippers. You can like go take breaks and talk to your dog in between, and then just makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, it's weird interviewing for jobs, defending virtually, interviewing for jobs virtually. Like everything's been virtual. So like I never saw my coworkers' faces because we all had masks on. So it's just strange time.
All right. Our last question is, what advice would you give to someone wanting to follow your career path?
Fake it till you make it. I think, like there's obviously for the academic career path, I think that there's like metrics that you want to meet to make yourself competitive. And I think, we're all aware of what those are, like publishing papers, getting grants, presenting your work, everything like that. So yeah, those boxes are all kind of important to check. And I think like thinking outside the box is also a good thing, and like following your passions in terms of like science and research. Finding a good mentor has been very helpful, like for me, a supportive mentor and even I think having like a more hands-off mentor during my postdoc has helped given me more confidence in some ways, because I do feel more independent now, and that helps give me confidence that I can at least figure it out how to do stuff as at the next career stage. So yeah.
I think having a great mentor is extremely important. And I'm still in touch with my PhD mentor. Like it's only been like a little over a year, but I still talk to him a lot. And like when they announced that they were laying us off, he was the first. I like told my husband, but then I called him before I even called my parents, because just needed to like get back into it and figure out what I should do and like get his advice. So I think having a good mentor, but also I found that like if you apply for jobs you're not even remotely qualified for, you're not going to get a call back. So I feel like next time I go through this process, I probably wouldn't do that again. But at the same time, like if you read something initially and it's a job you really want, don't just assume you're not qualified for it. Just like try and go through the job description and try and make your experience relevant to it and figure it out, because you may be surprised, like especially for MSL positions, a lot of what you've done before can seem like it's good experience and can be like made to feel a little bit more relevant than you may initially expect. So like don't get turned off, but also like don't necessarily waste your time, because people are just going to skip right through it if they don't think you're a remotely possible candidate.
Thank you, guys. Are there any questions from this audience? I need to check the Zoom.
Yeah, my question was basically more for you, but do you like, is there anything, I know you said early on you like
turned it off actually. Is it green? Okay, never mind.
Yeah. Maybe it's not close enough. Okay. I was wondering like if there's anything about being in academia that you miss, or that you kind of wish was more incorporated into your job in industry, or if you're just like, I love industry, like don't miss being in the lab or sort of like the PhD process.
I don't miss academia, but also like I had a very good experience, and I did not run away from it. I was just ready to move on to something different. Like I worked for my my thesis mentor. I worked for him for 7 years because I was there for 3 years, and then I did 4 years of my PhD, and we're really close. And I think I'll always like be in touch with him. So I was very happy in the lab, but I was just ready to move on. So I don't miss it. I'm not coming back.
All right, thank you guys. Let me see here. Yes, you did. Hey. So next up, we have our keynote speaker, Colagiovanni. Let me pull up her PowerPoint. Do you want the clip-on mic or just the podium? All right, we'll do this. Nope. No, it's gonna be up here.
I'm not even go in the corner over there, so I'm not
Yeah.
anybody. Let's see. How's that? Let's see. How's that? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. If they can't hear me, I'll go over here so I'm far away from everybody so I don't, get my vaccinated breath on anybody. Okay. Well, nice to see you this afternoon. Thanks for coming. I appreciate the invitation to come and speak with you guys. And I would like this to be interactive. So, there's going to be a couple of points. Oh, pause.
The Zoom camera's over here, so.
Oh, hold on. Hold on. Okay, I'm moving over here. Is that better? Then maybe I'll just move the chairs. Okay, perfect. That's good. Better? Am I on Zoom now? Yeah, it is kind of weird to do it with the Zoom in the background. Okay, so I thought we'd start off with a little quiz, and you're all science engineering people, so you might want to have a piece of paper to take a note. It's only going to take 30 seconds. There we go. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Does anybody want to share what they said for their 4 nouns? I'll go first, just to make it easier. When I think of myself, I say woman, scientist, mom, wife. But I'm conflicted because part of me feels like I should say mom before scientist. Why do I have that conflict? It's like the stuff that's inside of us. You know, we sort of think of ourselves in different ways and can feel guilty about even how we perceive ourselves to be. Does anyone want to share what theirs are? Sure. You have the same conflict? Yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes to be authentic with who you really think you are, but you know who you are inside, right? And so being honest with yourself sometimes is even difficult. Advance. Anybody see this movie, this documentary? So a lot of you guys are familiar with this. It was a documentary that came out last year, Picture a Scientist. And I found it was really troubling and profound because it talked about how women are routinely discriminated against in academia. The thing I also found troubling for myself was when I looked in my mind's eye at what a scientist was, I saw a white man in a lab coat. In my own head, how did I not see a woman in a lab coat? So I said, all right, what am I going to do? I'm going to call my kids because I want to know, what do my kids think a scientist looks like? And I called my daughter, Maya, and I said, when you think of a scientist, what do you think of? And she said, I think of you. I think of a woman. I was like, oh, all right, I did something right. My own mind isn't right. And then I called my son, and he said, I think of you too. I was like, okay. But these kids have a mother who's a scientist. What about the rest of the world? If I think of a white man in a lab coat, what do other people think? Most people picture that, you know, NIH director in his white lab coat, gray hair looking official. So it takes time to change that narrative. And honestly, it's sort of up to us to help change the narrative on this. Next slide. You may have heard of this concept called the leaky pipe. This is something that permeates science, and particularly in academia. It's the idea that when we start out at the beginning of the pipe, there's an equal number of men and women. And if you look at today in college, there's more women in undergrad than there are men. It's about a 3-to-2 ratio right now. But over time, particularly in some fields, there's a disequilibrium. Math and engineering in particular, there's a lot more men in the field, although there are more women that are entering it. When we look at the biological sciences and life sciences, there's parity, which is amazing. Yet more women fail to achieve tenure-track positions in academia. Why do you think that is? Yeah. Definitely one idea.
The challenges that like face on the road to get there, like there's not support for kind of the challenges that women especially might face, I guess.
Yeah, your thoughts?
It is dang hard to be a mom and a scientist.
It is. That is
really hard.
It is dang hard. Yeah.
There are not allowances built in to NIH or NSF so we're always competing. You're always racing against people who have less responsibility.
And those people are men. Why is it that we accept that? Right? I mean, if you read Lean In, we should have support from our spouses that we can do these things, but it doesn't work out that way. Still today, women do a greater share of childcare and house care. I mean, we may work as much or more than a partner, but we end up with more of those kind of responsibilities. And the other piece is if the faculty that's already tenured is predominantly male, is it more difficult for us to get that position? And I think the answer to that is also true. Thanks. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk about myself now. Yeah. My story, though, is not your story. We all come from different perspectives. And I have inherent biases. I have unconscious biases, subconscious biases, and I'm learning about those. And so I am starting from a different place. I grew up in an Italian-American family in New England, and so my perspective is different than a lot of you guys, probably. I'm a cis, hetero, Gen X, white woman who's been married for 30 years to that guy, and we have 2 kids together. So my perspective is different. As far as privilege, I grew up in a middle-class family, and I grew up next to my grandparents. And in the house next to them, I grew up with my aunt and uncle and their 5 kids. So I had a village, which gave me a lot of support. My parents, I was lucky enough, paid for my undergrad, and I had a TA stipend in grad school. So I came out of school with no debt. And I'm sure some of you have debt. And starting in a hole puts you in a very different career place than me, who came out with none of that. And I get that. Next slide. So that's me before I had really curly hair, but it started then. I always loved science. I was the kid that cut up bugs and looked at them under the microscope. I knew I wanted to do science. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do medicine, but early on I realized I didn't like people that whined. And a lot of medicine is patients that, they don't feel well and they whine at you. And I thought, I think I'm going to go in the lab. That's probably what is better for me. So I went to University of Vermont and got a bachelor's in science and went to work as a clinical microbiologist in Boston. One thing I've done throughout my career until this current job is have a second job. That is my own paranoia with a plan B for everything. I came from a family that was very frugal, Yankee kind of New England frugal. And so you had to have money in the bank. And so I always had a second job. So I would have money in the bank. I was board certified as a medical technologist. And after working in Boston for a couple of years, my then boyfriend, now husband, was in Texas in a town called Kerrville, which we affectionately call the black hole of the universe. And said, let's go to Colorado and, try life there. And I thought, okay, well, I can apply to grad school at CU. And he was going to start a business in construction. But before that, I went and did a medical mission in India for 5 months. And that had a profound impact on me. We went to remote villages that don't have any medical care at all and did polio clinics. We treated patients for TB. We dealt with children with parasites, and I was the only white person for a very long way. And it taught me what it was like to be a minority. And people would come up to me and touch my hair because they'd never seen curly hair before. So it was a very impactful experience for me. And I came back and I started at CU. And at the time, the School of Pharmacy was in Boulder. So I started my grad school career in Boulder. And we were living in Breckenridge because that's where my husband's business was. And I commuted from Breckenridge to Boulder and slept on a friend's couch 2 nights a week. And it was just crazy, but I was bartending at night too. So it made for, crazy start to grad school. But my second year, we lived in Chautauqua because the little cottages in Chautauqua were married student housing at the time. So that was pretty neat till we decided that was insane. Let's move to Golden. It's a little in between for us. And we still live there now. And I was the first graduate of the molecular toxicology and environmental health sciences degree when we graduated from the Health Science Center, which then, of course, got torn down. And now here you guys are. And I promptly got a postdoc fellowship. I heard Reena mention in the talk before that having that great relationship with her mentor was really important. Maybe it was her PI that helped her for those kind of things. I did not have that relationship with my PI. He didn't help me do anything. So I took it upon myself, and through a contact, got a postdoc fellowship, and that was in immunotoxicology. And it was the start of my career. And I have since got board certification. I don't know if any of you are in the toxicology program, but a diplomat and American Board of Toxicology is our certification. And I suggest, if you go on in your career there, to certify yourself, because those little initials after your name, maybe they don't mean you're smarter than anybody else, but it shows you did the work and gives you some credibility. Okay, go to the next slide, thanks. So I put this slide up because I feel the boys club mindset is still very real. You know, these girls are looking in earnest at this molecule, and these guys are looking at them like, what are you guys doing? It's less of a boys club than when I started in school. We didn't have any female faculty members. It was an all male faculty. And that's changed, particularly School of Pharmacy now has a large number of female faculty members. But if you look at Fortune 500 companies, there's more men named John than there are female CEOs in those 500 companies. We still have a lot of work to do, but we've come a really long way. Next slide. I put this slide up primarily because of COVID. You guys are dealing with things that you normally don't have to deal with in grad school that make your work even more difficult. You work long hours, you work weekends, you work nights, you do whatever it takes to get the research done. And it's okay not to be okay. In 2020 and 2021, I gave everybody a pass. You have to wear a mask in the lab. You know, you have to get tested for COVID. This is extraordinary times. As I said, when I was in school, we had all male faculty, and my grad advisor was a man, and I was at the time living in Breckenridge, working bartending and driving from Breckenridge to Boulder, and I was losing my mind at one point. And my husband said, just go talk to your advisor, tell him you're stressed out. You know, there wasn't like, you know, self-care then. There wasn't wellness. So I went to him and I said, you know, I'm really stressed out. I've got all this stuff going on and I don't know what to do. And he just looked at me and he did not say a word and kind of just shrugged. And I got up and I left, and I never said another word to another faculty member about any struggles with mental health or stress. There are resources now that can help you, and I suggest take advantage of them. Talk to a friend, find support, because the work you're doing is really hard, and recognize that, and it's okay to not be okay. So you can see that's my dad with me in the picture. That's where I get my curly hair from. I said I started at Amgen. It was actually a company called Synergen when I got the postdoc. And a month into my postdoc, the company imploded. They were working on a drug for sepsis, and it failed in clinical trials. And so my postdoc advisor said, you might want to look for another postdoc. But Amgen swooped in and bought the company. And they said, she's cheap, let's keep her. So I was doing immunotox work, and I must have been doing enough good work that they kept me on after my postdoc, and I became a research scientist. But it was sort of an experiment for Amgen to have an outpost away from Thousand Oaks. And they said to us early on after they acquired the company that we're going to stay in Boulder forever, you know, but just in case, we're going to tell you guys, we're going to give you a 13-month retention bonus in case we close the company. And I got that 13-month retention bonus a year later when they closed the company, which was great because that money was the seed money for my kids' college fund. This was 1998 at the time. And I was a little scared. I'd just gotten laid off. It was my first job. I didn't know what happened or what that meant. But a very important lesson I learned early on in work was network, and be kind to people and network with men and women. Really important to make those connections, because an individual that I met at Amgen said, hey, I'm going to this other company called Nexstar Pharmaceuticals. It's right down the road. We're going to be working on these cool liposomal forms of antibiotics and oncology agents. You know, do you want to come check it out? So I said, sure. So I took a couple of weeks off, went to Costa Rica, decompressed, and then started at Nexstar and was doing toxicology work there. And they were acquired by Gilead Sciences. And Gilead Sciences, you might know them, they make a lot of drugs for hepatitis. They developed Tamiflu when I was there for reduction in duration of flu and severity of flu. The week that I started at Gilead Sciences now, I got pregnant. And I was pregnant for 5 months before I told anybody I was pregnant at work, because I was really afraid of what were they going to think that I was pregnant. And exactly what I thought they were going to think happened at 5 months when I told my supervisor that I was pregnant. He kind of looked at me and was like, oh. And I don't think you could get away with this now, but at the time, one of my male coworkers said to me, you know, when I was pretty big, said to me, you look like a cartoon character. You kind of look like a normal person from the back, but when you turn sideways, you kind of look like a cartoon character. So, you know, being pregnant at work was not really a good situation. That was 99 when I had my daughter. I took 3 months off from work and then went back to work and had a great home daycare facility that I sent her to with 4 other little kids. Gilead Sciences was working on these liposomal drugs and decided to spin off the group that was working on liposomal oncology products and other oncology products. So they gave that division to OSI Pharmaceuticals. So we stayed in the same building, same offices. We just became a new company at this point. And at OSI Pharmaceuticals, we developed Tarceva, which was a really important early receptor tyrosine kinase drug for EGFR receptor positive patients with non-small cell lung cancer. I also got pregnant with my second son 3 years later and had him when I was at OSI. From there, a colleague I had worked with had left and gone to a company called Replidyne. They were developing antibiotics and they were trying to get a new drug application submitted within 2 years, and they needed a toxicologist to come on board. So I said, okay. Replidyne had about 50 people at it. So I'd gone from, you know, Amgen, which is 50,000 people, Gilead, maybe we had 10,000, OSI had a couple hundred to 50 now. And we worked really hard to develop a drug called Ferropenem. It was going to be this blockbuster for skin and soft tissue infection and for community-acquired pneumonia. We submitted it to the FDA and they rejected it. When you're a small company with 50 people, it doesn't take much to destroy a company. So that blew up. And a friend that I'd worked with at Replidyne said, hey, I'm going to this new company called N30 Pharma. They're working on nitric oxide. They wanted to develop drugs to treat cystic fibrosis. And I thought, that sounds really cool. I'll come along and do that too. So I was promoted to senior director at N30. There were 4 people when I started at that company and 19 when I left, and I stayed there for 8 years. I left because the drugs we were working on didn't succeed. So I'd worked at Replidyne on a failed NDA, and then I'd worked at N30 for drugs that didn't make it to the market. And this is about 2015, and a friend said, you know, we're starting a company. There were 2 people this time, and we're going to develop alternative cannabinoid formulations. And so I kind of took a little bit of a right turn and said, that sounds kind of different and interesting. I know the kind of people that work in biotech. They're all introverts and they're super smart and they're scientists. I'm going to go work for this company developing cannabinoids. And all of a sudden I was exposed to commercial development and branding and creating logos and giving podcasts and giving webinars and seminars. And it was fascinating, really interesting stuff. I felt like I got a second PhD in cannabinoid sciences. And then COVID happened. And our business shut down. We got furloughed. And then they decided they couldn't continue anymore. And so this was about really early in the pandemic. And so I took last summer of 2020 off to think about, what do I want to do next? What's kind of my game plan? In the meantime, though, how I said I always had a second job, I was always consulting. So one thing to think about is you have the ability to be your own boss. The skills that you have for biotech companies are often very valuable. If you're a pharmacologist or a toxicologist, you can help virtual and small companies develop drugs. So I contacted a few of the people I had done prior work with, and they said, sure, you can do consulting all summer for us. And I did that. And a previous colleague I had worked with at Amgen needed somebody to run her toxicology group at Pfizer in Boulder. So I took that position. I'm going back to doing toxicology for oncology products. And you might say, well, you went from senior director to VP back to senior director. But if you think about the scope of the company, I was a VP of R&D of a company it was about 15 people when it closed, to a company of 100,000 people. Sometimes taking a step back for a bigger company and more opportunity is not a bad way to go. So think about that. You don't always have to go up. You can go right sometimes. You can go left and figure out what is the best decision for you. Next slide. You may or may not have heard of the term imposter syndrome before. And I bring this up because the first place I heard about it was at a commencement address by the dean of the School of Pharmacy. He brought it up. He was a pretty accomplished guy and said, I have imposter syndrome. I don't feel like I should be where I am. And this is very typical of people that are high achieving. They think they shouldn't be where they are, in the position they're in. They're not good enough. How can I be in this position? And you all might feel this at times, particularly when you're starting something new or getting out of your comfort zone. Every time you move from one job to the next, it's super scary. You don't know the people, you don't know the work, you don't know the expectations. And so you might have a little bit of this imposter syndrome. But I want you to know that you are good enough, and someday you'll be an expert, and that comes with time. You'll learn, and you're going to be the expert in the room. I was going through my slides with one of my friends, and she said, and be sure to tell them you don't have to have all the answers to be an expert. I'm guessing mostly type A perfectionists in this room. And so we figure we need to know everything, right? You're giving a talk at a platform or you're at a poster and you're thinking in your head, gaming out, what are the questions everybody's going to ask me because I need to be prepared for those. That's just good preparation, right? But you do not have to have all the answers to be an expert. There's something called the internet now. You can find a lot of good stuff on there too, if you find good sources. One thing that happens a lot in our careers is we have a plan, right? You think, I'm going to do this in 5 years, and this is where I'm going to be, and maybe in life too. I'm going to get married or be with a partner, and I'm going to have kids, and I'm going to have a house, and da-da-da-da-da. I want you to know some things you can't predict, and so maybe it's a good idea to give yourself a little room in your planning. So when my second child was born, Wyatt was healthy, and on his 2-month well baby checkup, his amazing pediatrician said to me, he still looks jaundiced to me, and he shouldn't be this jaundiced. Let's go do some blood work. So when you try to get a blood draw from a 2-month-old, they don't really have very good veins. So what they do is they take an elastic band and put it around their skull to inflate one of the vessels. And as you're sitting there blacking out, watching your 2-month-old get a blood draw, they pull the tube. And my son was diagnosed with a rare liver disease called biliary atresia. It means it's common bile duct closed up. It's a 1 in 20,000 birth defect. No pre-existing kind of thing. It was just bad luck of the draw. So at 2 months, he had a surgery where they routed a piece of his duodenum into the head of his liver to act as a bile duct. And it lasted for 10 years, which was amazing. When he was 10, though, his liver failed. And so he had to transplant. And being a full-time working mom with the burden of the healthcare insurance on me, because my husband did construction and didn't have good health insurance, I couldn't stop working when my son went on the transplant list. So I have amazing friends and family. And it was the first time in my life where I had to ask for help. That's a hard thing to do for some people. And so needing people and asking for help was something that took my son's illness for me to recognize, but it's okay to ask for help. He transplanted and he's doing amazing. This is 9 years later now. But give yourself space to not plan away your whole career, because you just never know what might happen there. I'm optimistic about women in science. I think there's been a lot of things over the last 5 years that helped me recognize there's a lot of change since I started my career. The Me Too movement, I think, moved the needle a lot and made people recognize what's acceptable behavior and not acceptable behavior. Even in the labs, there's stuff that goes on. We know that. Women's National Soccer League, Megan Rapinoe has been amazing, trying to get parity on salary for women's soccer, who outperform male soccer dramatically, but are severely underpaid. USA Gymnastics, with their incident with Larry Nassar, violating all of those gymnasts, is unbelievable that it went on so long and the FBI let it go on and didn't stop it. I think was a wake-up call for a lot of people. The Black Lives Matter movement and protests last summer made us all more aware of privilege and prejudice, and hopefully we learned to be better people from that. At Pfizer, we have diversity, equity, and inclusive awareness, and I'm part of that team. And we're really working to hire minority people in science, so there's more representation, because we know when you're the only one of a group, it feels very uncomfortable. Having a certain number makes you feel more accepted and welcoming. And then these two little cuties are Gen Z. They give me a lot of hope. That's my daughter on the left and my niece on the right. They don't put up with a lot of the stuff I put up with. They don't take any of it. And I think they have, through social media awareness, are approaching their careers a little differently. And I think that is only going to make women to be more empowered. When I was asked to give this talk, I asked some of my DEI colleagues, if you could give yourself advice, your younger self, what would you want to tell other women in science? And there were some great tips here. Be open to possibilities. Sometimes you might take a job that you don't think is necessarily a good fit, and it turns out to be great. It can be a risk. We think of reward primarily as monetary, but sometimes there could be great personal growth in a job without the corresponding financial aspect. But what we suck really bad at is negotiating. Learn this now. Learn to negotiate and do not undervalue your worth financially. There's been change now where a recruiter can't ask you what you make, but they can ask you what you want. And so what I did at Pfizer when I was starting, they asked that question. I said, nope, not going to tell you because I don't want to sell myself short. You tell me what you think I'm worth. And it got me $30,000 more because I didn't say anything. So learning to negotiate is important. If you find yourself in a role that sucks the lifeblood out of you, think about a change. Don't do a job just for the money. Have a second job so you can leave. Gives you some flexibility. And get help. When my kids were little and my son was ill, I had a nanny in the summer, because what do you do with a kid in the summer, right? They can't be in school anymore. You've got to find someone to take care of them. You can also now, I think, with flexibility in work from home situations, a couple days a week, maybe work from home. I had a woman that came in and prepped meals for me. I had a house cleaner. I had a beloved stay-at-home mom friend who, when my kids got sick and I was at the office, would pick up my kids. Or stay-at-home dad. Maybe your partner is a stay-at-home dad. That can work for a lot of couples too. Some. Yeah, that's true. And then as you're thinking, as you get older, what do you want to be, remembered for? Do you want to be remembered because you stayed the latest at work? Or that you were a kind person, you were an amazing mom, daughter, friend? Invest your time where you want to be, accordingly remembered. That's my big kids now. He's 19 and she's 22. Another coworker suggested speaking up, make sure your ideas are heard, even if it takes multiple tries. Sometimes you'll be in a meeting and you'll speak up and have an idea and they'll kind of, I don't think that's great. And it'll go around the room and a man it'll come back to and you have the same thing you just said. And everybody will be like, that was a great idea. That happens. Speak up. Don't be afraid of tough conversations. This is the salary part. Diversity, equity, inclusion, all those things. Be represented at the table. Ask for help. Like I said, that's a really hard thing to do, but it's okay to do it. And it's okay to say no. Those stay-at-home moms can bake the cookies. Sometimes you don't have to do everything. We think of, you could work, you could stay home, you could do all the stuff. Sometimes it's okay to say no. You don't have to do it all. Be flexible, open to opportunities, and set boundaries too. If you say, I don't want to work after 6 o'clock at night, keep that boundary. Set it for yourself, whatever that is. So, have you thought about those nouns you used in the beginning? Are there other things? You could be a dog mom. You could be a cat mom. You could be a friend. You could be a daughter, whatever they are. Just be authentic. And as I said, network. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I'll take any questions if you have them. Yeah.
So Zoom can hear you. So yeah, it definitely seemed like your network helped you in all those kind of career transitions that you went through. Mm-hmm. Was there like stressful times in transitioning from like those different, like between those different careers and like when the companies were shutting down, or how did you kind of deal with those?
It's funny. There's something called survivor syndrome that happens when a company is closing or downsizing, and the people that leave feel bad, but the people that stay feel worse because you feel like, oh my God, all my friends are leaving and I still have a job, and you feel terrible. That happens. The first time you get laid off, and in biotech and pharma, this is going to happen because there's consolidation, a drug doesn't work, it happens all the time. Pfizer just divested like their Upjohn group of people. They're spinning off to another group. The first time it happened, I was kind of terrified. I thought, oh man, this was my first job and I just got laid off, and we had bought a condo, and what's going to happen? This is why I think having good connections, being really active on LinkedIn, having an updated resume or CV, so that if something you get wind of, this drug isn't going to work, we don't know what's going to happen, plan B. Always have a plan B in place, because I really think I could say Pfizer, there's many people I work with that have been there 20 plus years, which I find astounding. But most places, you know, people stay somewhere between 4 to 8 years is kind of typical before you move on to the next job. And the easiest way to get a job is to already have a job. So when you go to a conference, you make connections, you know, you meet people, do that networking. It really does. And not just women, men too, because for me, I always will either find somebody in the room that has curly hair because I know we've got a common interest from the get-go, right? Or I'll find the person that's like on the back wall, like having a, you know, beer in their hand, because I can relate to that introvert too. I'm not the person at the front of the room that's going to be, you know, the charismatic center of attention person. Find the people that kind of work for you.
Okay, so we have a question from Zoom. How was your experience communicating your pregnancy at different jobs you were at? Because was it at different
it was
companies
the
you were
same
with?
company, even though it had changed twice. So it was the same HR people. You know, HR people can't say anything to you. They obviously cannot treat you differently because you're pregnant. And you can, depending on if you're going to have natural birth or cesarean section, and I had 2 C-sections, you got, you know, a higher number of weeks off when you have a C-section. I will say some female bosses are almost worse with the pregnancy announcement than male bosses. And I say that because I've worked for a couple of women that never had children. So it's interesting. The group of women that I went to grad school with, almost all have chosen to get married, but not all of them chose to have children. And particularly the women that are older than me that have been in senior roles did not have children. And I don't think it was because they couldn't figure out how to balance it and had no support. I think that's getting better, that you can have a family if you choose that and be able to work. And so now HR, you know, there's a whole policy in place at most big companies. It's different if you're at a startup company though, where there aren't rules around this and they don't necessarily have to pay you if you go on maternity leave. So I think, you know, it's company to company how you handle it. But for me personally, I was pretty nervous to make that announcement because I didn't feel like it was going to be well received based on how I'd seen other people before me get pregnant and kind of went down. I'm hoping that behavior is better now.
Any more questions there? I have one more on Zoom. Where did it? Oh, my chat went all the way to the top. Hold on a second. Okay. So when you were in graduate school getting your PhD, is going into industry something you always had in mind, or did you want to go the academic route and then that veered off because of your postdoc?
So for toxicology, there's kind of 3 avenues, right? There's the classic academia, there's industry, and then there's also government. So I could have gone to FDA, I could have gone to EPA, or even an NGO if I wanted to. I knew early on when I saw the PIs writing grants and the stress of that whole thing that was not for me. So I kind of was debating, do I want to go work at EPA because I really loved environmental toxicology, or did I want to go into industry? And so I met, we have an annual meeting called Society of Toxicology. And when I was there, I went and met with a couple of women that I knew through various people to get their perspective on how did you get your job and what did you do and what was beneficial. And I'm mentoring a couple of students now from HBCUs, and these are the exact same questions they're asking me. How do you figure this stuff out? You know, I think the first question is, do I postdoc or not postdoc? I felt the value for me personally was because I wanted a different set of skills that I didn't have, so it would make me more marketable down the line. And I'm really glad I did an industry postdoc because I saw from the inside kind of, what do you do in business? And it's a team approach, which I really liked, versus where I saw in academia, it was like this silo, we can't share any data because we don't want to get scooped on these papers. And it, you know, it's kind of a different function. Ours is all team-based. And I like operating in that kind of an environment. So I just ended up in biotech. I could have ended up at EPA and done the government thing, but I just went that route.
Any more questions from you guys, Amber?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, in your career transitions, maybe interviewing for different positions, or like just looking back on your different careers, were there any like red flags that came up at those places that you think like maybe these people that you would tell people to look out for, like when they go to apply at different places?
So the only red flag I had, which I should have paid attention better to, when I was interviewing with the CEO at N30, he was, I hope nobody, is anybody in medical school before I say this? No, okay. No, I'm not. I don't want to diss anybody that's in med school. He was an MD. And when you're dealing with an MD CEO, there's a big ego that goes along with that. And he was a nice guy though. I had been there about 6 months, and a friend of mine worked for a company that was working on this really cool drug. And I thought it would work really well with the stuff we were working to. So I brought that to him and said, I think this would be really cool, and maybe we could do a collaboration. And he said to me, I do the business development. You don't do the business development. And at that point, I was like, red flag, red flag. So ego, I think understanding that, that was one thing that I should have paid better attention to, but I walked into a landmine with that then really disrupted my relationship with him for a lot of different reasons. I would suggest when you're thinking about a company, get on their website. You can get a pretty good idea what the leadership team looks like. I will say when I was going to start at Pfizer, I did that, and much of the upper management at the time was all white men. Now, this was right when Black Lives Matters was happening, not last summer, and awareness really has grown over the last year. And Pfizer has made a commitment to hire not only people of color, they've just recognized bringing in refugees from Afghanistan to hire on board, and are doing a lot of leadership change. So there's been a lot of women that have been promoted and men of color over the last year or so. So I think if you want to see yourself represented there, though, look for that too.
One more question. Do you have any advice for negotiating with a startup where you might not be able to ask what's the salary range?
Yeah, because I did that. So the question is salary the most important thing to you, or vacation time, or benefits? I will often negotiate for more vacation time because that's really important to me than salary. So think about, you may not know what they can afford. They know in their own head, right, what they can afford. Go high and see what happens. They can only say no. So it's worth asking for more. You never know. You might get what you want.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Wait, let me give you the mic. No, it's not. I just want how you found the nanny and the people that would cook for you. Because it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
So
well,
maybe I don't know.
I could say a couple things about that. So when so when my son was first diagnosed, the company I was at the time was OSI Pharmaceuticals. They had a policy that you could give vacation time to another employee, and everybody there donated their vacation time to me so that I could be home with my son, which was amazing. And they had some programs where they would find you a nanny. So depending on where you're working, use those resources. Like Pfizer has amazing, if my parents got sick, there's programs that I can use through Pfizer to support me. But this is where you go to your network of friends or Facebook or whatever it is and be like, hey, I'm looking for blah, 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 blah. But I did all of my like find the nanny stuff through my employer, which was great. And that worked out really well. And I went and interviewed, like 6 of them before I found the right one. I didn't feel comfortable in one of those childcare centers because I just felt like there was too many germs and too many kids. So I wanted a home setting. So that's why I really wanted to kind of go that way. And then another friend of mine had found the cook. And I was like, oh, I want her. And then another friend had found a cleaning gal. And so just like tap into your network and ask people, whether it's your close friends or friends of friends or like sometimes Facebook, if you have those groups in your neighborhood and I hate Nextdoor because it tends to be, people that fight a lot, but there's great resource information on Nextdoor too. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you. All right, I'm going to call Lauren back up so we can do the rest of the raffle. And then we're going to announce our award winners. All right, so this year we have 3 Outstanding Women in STEM awards, 1 Mentorship Award, 1 Community Service Award, and 1 Ally Award. So our Mentorship Award goes to a woman that actively participates in traditional and peer mentoring through not only our Women in STEM mentorship program, but for graduate students, researchers, physicians, and professors, both at CU Anschutz campus and Children's Hospital. So we would like to present the 2021 Mentorship Award to Dr. Jill Carr, who I think is on the Zoom. And we have these little Colorado goodie bags with some a STEMinist shirt. So we'll coordinate to have that picked up. And our Community Service Award goes to a woman that uses social media to communicate science in multiple languages. So in particular, she communicates COVID-19 related material to individuals who may not have access to scientific journals and writings in her native Ethiopian language. So this has resulted in many of her followers actually reaching out to her and telling her they received the vaccine because of her science communication. So we would like to present the 2021 Community Service Award to Dr. Roman Ayala. And then our last award, our Ally Award, goes to a dental student that helps manage the international dental students and serves on a panel about being LGBTQ on Anschutz campus. And in addition, she also started an LGBTQ student group for the School of Dentistry. So we would like to present the 2021 Ally Award to Alicia Prince. And I just want to take the opportunity to kind of highlight some of the upcoming Women in STEM events and opportunities. So we do have the high school mentorship program that needs about 5 more mentors. These are for sophomore age high schoolers and speakers. They host events, typically a once a month commitment. And so they're looking for a few more mentors there. And then Yeah. And then we're also hosting a PRA Appreciation Day, November 18th. So we have more information coming out about that, but that's just to kind of show our appreciation for a group that we feel like doesn't always get appreciated, similar to what Bruce and Lora were saying about how postdocs didn't get their recognition until it was kind of brought to light. So that's happening November 18th from 12 to 2 p.m. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming, everyone here and everyone on Zoom. We really appreciate it. Please follow our social media and our website. Sign up for our listserv up at the front. And we're going to raffle off a couple more stickers and a t-shirt. So
all right.
The next sticker winner is Carlin Ruffinact. I think she's on there. All right, we'll do another sticker to Catherine Birch. And a sticker to Emily Bates. Woo! You're good.
Sorry, technical difficulty.
And Jess Spiltor. Another sticker winner. We'll do one more sticker and then a t-shirt. Catherine Smith. And then one more t-shirt to Suna Huang. All right, thank you guys so much. We're heading over to Ursula. If anyone wants to join us, we have a table there. And we'll see you all over there. Thank you so much.